This week's episode is sponsored by Neon's film, Presence. Directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Koepp, Presence is a thrilling new ghost story about a family that moves into a new home only to discover that they are not alone. Starring Lucy Liu, Chris Sullivan, and Julia Fox, Presence has been hailed as one of the scariest movies you'll see this year. Experience it in theaters on January 24th.
Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Bored with your boring cardio? Stop pedaling that snooze cycle to Nowheresville and try some cardio that's actually fun. Supernatural Fitness, available on MetaQuest. Isn't that right, Jane Fonda?
Cardio will never be boring again.
Sweat to the beat of thousands of chart-topping songs inside stunning virtual landscapes.
Bet your stationary bike can't do that.
Visit GetSupernatural.com and join the next fitness revolution. Supernatural VR Fitness, only on MetaQuest. Rated Teen for Teen.
You have to
control yourself!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking a kind of cute, or a kind of hot, or a kind of sexy, or better be fucking hysterically funny but not funny looking guy who you could fuck. We're talking, you got 2 jobs, kiss good, and make sure my hair don't get wet. And we're talking, well, damn if you ain't so sweet, you make sugar taste just like salt. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we are talking Shanna Banana and not Shauna Banana.
Truly that, yes. And Jordan Ladd back in the pod.
I love Jordan Ladd. Please, Jordan Ladd, act in more movies. People, give her more jobs. But yes, everyone, we are discussing Quentin Tarantino's half of Grindhouse in Death Proof. Finally, we're finishing our double feature that we started last year, Joe.
Oh my God, finally. Don't use the word finally around me, please. Yes, we are wrapping it up. I'm excited. Trace, it feels funny because I know Quentin Tarantino doesn't have a ton of movies, so it's not like, oh, wow, there's so many to choose from. But it does feel a little weird that it's taken year 6 to get to a film he's actually directed.
Yeah, interesting, right? Because, what else could we really cover? I think both of us will make a case that we'll just cover Kill Bill one day because...
Absolutely.
Why not? But yeah, he hasn't done a full out-and-out horror film. And this is the closest we've gotten to it.
Yeah. Grindhouse is so genre adjacent to a bunch of different things. It definitely made sense to me. And I think you're right. From the point that we decided we were going to cover Planet Terror, we thought, okay, well, it's just a matter of time until we cover Death Proof. But also, yeah, I guess you could do his entry in 4 Rooms because that's kind of also genre adjacent.
Oh, I've never seen 4, but he didn't. He only wrote that. Didn't he? Wrote that segment. I guess it's like an anthology. So they each. Okay, yeah. Sorry, scratch that.
Again, no, it's the direction part, right? Because obviously the other very clear contender we could do is his script for From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because I feel like if you walk into Death Proof expecting a Quentin Tarantino horror movie, right, you're going to be a little disappointed because this is an hour and 53 minutes of talking. And
indeed,
I am not saying that as a negative. I really like this movie. Joe, refresh my memory. I feel like back when we did Planet Terror, you did say this was your preferred entry in the Grindhouse film.
It is, yeah. And not just because it is talkier, so I feel like we kind of get to know a little bit more about the characters, but Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we're going to have some conversations about the depiction of women as written by Quentin Tarantino, because I'll confess, this is also the first time that I've seen this fully expanded edition. So I'm really used to the 90-minute version.
Interesting.
And this one does flesh them out, but I don't know, I was going back and forth with how Tarantino actually shoots and depicts his female figures in this film.
I'm sure we will have a lot to debate, especially about how he writes them, because this is also the most like female-centric movie Tarantino has ever done. You know, with the exception of Kill Bill, which obviously has a female lead, but it's also not a female ensemble. And then, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, every movie has like one woman. You know, you have Inglourious Basterds and Shoshana, and then you have like a Jennifer Jason Leigh in The Hateful Eight, Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction. Like, it's all like that one woman, and it's always a great role, but it never like really rises above the men for me. And so this was what I was wanting from Tarantino when this movie came out.
Yeah. Okay, so I can't remember. Did you have a preference in terms of Planet Terror versus Death Proof, or has that changed?
It's so difficult, and I'm gonna be the asshole and say I don't really have a preference, because I think Grindhouse is a 5-star movie for me. Planet Terror and Death Proof are 5-star movies for me. And it's a thing where, you know, we talked about kind of the choice to play the kind of fast-paced Planet Terror before the slower-paced Death Proof in the double feature.
Yes.
Whether that was successful or not. And I would argue, I still don't know. Like, I've never watched them with Death Proof first, but I think watching Death Proof on its own is totally fine. But that being said, I understand, especially with that nearly 2-hour version, that you might have pacing issues, especially if you were not vibing with either group of girls, or at least one of them.
Okay, that is interesting. Yeah, because I do like that you flagged that people may have a preference for either the first half group or the second half group. And I feel like I want to know which one you go for, but we don't have to talk about it right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, I like all the girls. I do. I like all the girls. But
oh my God, you're so middle of the road. Don't make me choose. I like them all.
I can tell you because I was going to say, I can tell you the individual girls that I like the most. But I'm like, no, I actually not really. I like watching girls be bad.
I mean, then this is the movie for you.
It really is. But okay, so let me just dive into this. And everyone, I will just repeat this. Yes, this is the second part of Grindhouse. We do have an episode on Planet Terror, which I'm just going to come out and say it didn't get as many downloads as I expected for like a big title Robert Rodriguez movie. So please go back and listen to that for all of the production history on how Grindhouse came to be. Now we're going to go into just Death Proof on its own.
Yes, and I will co-sign on that, and also because we had great guests on that one, so go and listen to Jamie and Bhavna educate us.
Yes, very much so. And of course, we covered the Machete trailer in Planet Terror, but for this one, because we have a shorter production history, we will cover the 3 other fake trailers in this movie.
Right.
Okay, so it turns out that coming up with the idea for Death Proof was fairly simple, and not something that Quentin Tarantino had been thinking about for years in the same way Robert Rodriguez had with Planet Terror.
Okay.
And I should point out, I'm pulling all of this actually from the exact same Wizard Magazine article I pulled my Planet Terror stuff back last year, as well as several Quentin Tarantino interviews. Specifically, though, the most is coming from an Indie London interview from 2007. And, of course, all the bonus features on both the Death Proof Blu-ray and the Grindhouse Blu-ray, because they are separate.
Yes.
But anyway, so Tarantino came up with the idea for Death Proof like right when Grindhouse became a reality. And he was fascinated by the way stuntmen would, and I quote, death proof their cars so they can be driven headfirst into a brick wall at 60 miles per hour and still protect the driver. Right? And really, as a premise, that is a fantastic premise for a movie. A killer in a death-proof car. Easy peasy.
Truly. And this is something that is very near and dear to your and my hearts, right? I think of the number of times that you described something like Jaws 2 as a shark slasher movie. And this is a car slasher movie in some ways.
Very much so. And of course, I'm sure people will quibble with us about designating this a slasher, but
Yeah.
You know how when we talked about Malignant and how it's a quote-unquote giallo film, but it's not really a giallo film, but it's James Wan's version of a giallo film?
Yeah, like an ode to it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I feel about this movie. But I will say, so before we getting into like just kind of the general like, you know, the slasher versus exploitation mindset, these women, you know, this cast of women that Tarantino hasn't really worked with in the past. And I'm just going to read this quote for him as to why he wanted to use this to focus on a cast of female characters. So he says,
okay.
For the last 3 or 4 years, this is 2007, I've had a whole lot of different female friends. I have different clusters of female posses that I hang with. I've got male friends too, but the dynamic of a bunch of girls that hang out together has been more my reality for the last few years. I get to hear all the stuff they talk about and joke about, their camaraderie, and most of the girls in this movie are based on one person, or a combination of this person and that person. But I knew I wanted to follow these girls. That's what I do. I'm a writer. I soak up this stuff, and I've got to do something with it. So I'm putting this out there just because I'm like, okay, well, so if we're talking about some of the dialogue that these women say and the way they are characterized, these are based on women, albeit women that regularly hang out with Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, right. I mean, that context is important because you could argue that this is also specific to the world of Austin and Texas, right?
Very
because that's
much
really
so.
where we're shooting. That's where we're setting a lot of the film and so on. But yeah, I mean, if you're a person who hangs out around Quentin Tarantino, you might have a certain type of vibe. So I'm glad to hear him at least acknowledge, okay, this is principally based on people I actually know. And then you for acknowledging it's going to be a certain type of person who is spending time with him.
Exactly. And to be clear, like Jordan Ladd is one of those women. Like Jordan Ladd and Quentin Tarantino are besties ever since she was in Cabin Fever, because that was the Eli Roth connection. And of course, Eli Roth is in this movie. But okay, so I want to do women. I want to do stunt driver, killer car. Then he started thinking about the idea of doing something that, even though he claims it's not a slasher film because it doesn't have the slasher film structure, it seemingly has the slasher film structure.
Okay, so I'm safe in having said that already.
You are 100% absolutely, because he may say, oh, it's not a slasher film, but he says, but he's working through that framework because, again, like James Wan and *Malignant*, it's like his version of a slasher film. And so, but he was really stuck on structure, you know, because if this was a slasher film, we would be killing one of these girls every like 8 to 10 minutes.
Exactly. And we're definitely not doing that.
Not doing that, which I think, again, if you're walking and expecting a slasher movie, you might walk out saying, oh, that was kind of boring. But with that in mind, he was like, oh, you know, the perfect format is to have a bunch of girls together, have them all hang out, just like a slasher movie, but they'll have better dialogue.
Fair. Okay.
Which I would assume that is going into better character development as well. Anyway. So what Tarantino likes so much about slasher films, though, are the things that make them limiting. You know, they're all the same, and he says that's part of their charm. It's a perfect genre for subtext. That's why you can do so much subtextual film criticism on them, because they all follow the same pattern. And to fuck with that pattern too much is to fuck with the genre too much. So when he was like, cool, I'm going to do my version of a slasher, he didn't want to make it self-reflexive, meaning like he didn't want to make it his movie. He still wanted to kind of have some of those bones, but he also wanted to do it his way and get what he wanted out of it. So his solution was to merge the slasher idea with an exploitation film, since he had never done one of those before either. So it's a slasher exploitation film that isn't fully one or the other.
Right, yeah. And the idea that he would want to do something that is emblematic of his own style, which is talky, very memorable character beats, you know, larger than life stuff, but then also filmed very extra violent and that kind of stuff. It definitely makes sense.
I think you could, if you didn't tell me this is a Quentin Tarantino movie and you just played me Death Proof, I think by the script alone, I'd be able to tell, oh, this is a Quentin Tarantino movie. Now, visually, sometimes, I mean, we got a lot of feet. Obviously, we can make.
I was going to say there. I think I even messaged you that this may have more butt shots than the substance, which, folks, you can go back and listen to our commentary on that from the Patreon last month. But also, yeah, I mean, the sheer number of women's feet in this, I was just like, Quentin, can we just stop jerking it while we're making a movie, please?
The opening shot of this movie is feet. Like the title card
feet and
pops
ass.
up.
Feet and ass.
But that's where the exploitation's coming into it, you know?
Wow, yeah.
But okay, and by this point, just a quick little segue. Rodriguez had already made his trailer for Machete, which we discussed, of course, in the Planet Terror episode. But then he started showing that Machete trailer around to his friends. And so Eli Roth and Edgar Wright got a hold of it. And they were like, oh, can we do our own? And then...
Can we play too?
Well, interesting, because they went to Rodriguez, like they were all talking, but then Rob Zombie went to Tarantino later in the year at the Scream Awards and basically said, hey, I heard you're doing this. I have a trailer idea for Werewolf Women of the SS. And he was like, cool, go shoot it. We'll put it in the movie.
Right.
Now, back to Death Proof. So Tarantino did shoot it in his signature style, and we have his regular editor, Sally Minke, on this film. So I think, again, visually maybe not as much for me, but I do think in some of the editing choices you can tell it's a Tarantino film. But rather than use all of the technical wizardry that Rodriguez was using to distress his Planet Terror footage, like he was really trying to do a lot of it, more of it in camera, with with real effects, not any kind of CGI stuff, which I think, given what each film is, that does make sense. I mean, there is another world where the last 15 minutes of this movie is a CGI-ridden car chase, but that is not what we have here. But whereas Planet Terror is filled with a lot of CGI, although, as we discussed, like much more blendable CGI, like it's complementing the practical effects and not just like replacing them.
Well, and I would also argue it's playing to each director's strengths, right? Like, Tarantino has never been a person who uses a huge amount of CGI, so it wouldn't make sense for him to go the Planet Terror route, whereas with Rodriguez, he's always been an FX kind of person.
Well, and I will say, because if you remember, the budget for this movie was $30 million compared to the, $20 million that Planet Terror cost, and I think both of us balked at that. It was like, what? How does Death Proof cost that much more than Planet Terror? A movie that is like wall-to-wall effects. And I think, honestly, so there is a 20-minute featurette on this Blu-ray where they talk about just the car stuff they had to do because they are using and destroying real cars with real stunt drivers and everything is on camera. And I think that's where the money goes.
Yeah. And even though arguably you could look at this film and say, well, there's only really 2 car sequences, they comprise roughly, I want to say, a third of the film?
I mean, the last one, I think, is the last 15 to 20 minutes of the movie. And then, we're also just driving. I mean, the first 20 minutes of the movie is just driving around in a car.
Yeah. But we are also busting the fuck out of these cars. So if you had to do these several times, these are not new cars either. I mean, I guess no car is cheap, but these probably cost a fair amount of money.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to casting, let's start with Zoe Bell, because this is her first acting role. That's not as just a quote unquote, just a stunt woman.
Right.
When Tarantino was casting Kill Bill, he saw a 2004 documentary called Double Dare, which is about the life of the female stunt woman, Jeannie Epper, who has done a lot of stunt work over in the past 60, 70 years, but she is best known for being Linda Carter's stunt double on Wonder Woman, the TV show.
Okay.
But in this movie, it's kind of like tracing her life, but it also folds in Zoe Bell, and it's almost kind of like this spiritual passing of the torch from one iconic female stunt woman to the other. I also didn't know this, but Zoe Bell was Lucy Lawless' stunt double for Xena before she was doing Kill Bill.
Oh, man. I've got her filmography pulled up right now. Actually, Trace, why don't we play a little game? So we've technically covered 2 Zoe Bell projects on the podcast, one in which she is an actor and one in which she did the stunts. So can you tell me either or one of those?
The easier pick should be the movie that she was actually in and starring in, but that's Malignant.
It is Malignant, yes.
I was like, wait a minute, I know she's done movies because she did start acting more after she did this, but again, she's a stunt woman. But no, what stunts then did we see?
Okay, so as you said, she's done a shit ton. Seriously, folks, if you want to see, it's an impressive filmography, but she did the stunts on The Collector.
Oh, did not know that. Good for her.
No. Yeah.
I will say, too, I don't know if you've ever interviewed her, but she is the nicest person I think I have ever interviewed in my entire life. But yeah, so she's great. But anyway, so Tarantino watched this documentary and it showed him, she can act and she's a fascinating person. So after, working with her on Kill Bill, he did write this part for Zoe Bell just so she could play herself. And he didn't tell her he was doing that beforehand. He said, I'm going to put you in my movie. And she thought it was going to be like, I'm going to come in for a cameo in the bar scene and say, hi, I'm a stunt woman and leave. Because that is what we do with some people in that bar scene. The woman that plays Lana Frank, she's a famous stunt woman.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
But, okay, so then moving on to Vanessa Ferlito, who's the other kind of like almost Tarantino muse for this movie, which I had no idea about. Tarantino met her in Austin on the set of Man of the House, the Tommy Lee Jones UT cheerleader movie with Monica Keena.
Okay. I don't know if I want to know why Quentin Tarantino was visiting that set, but okay.
So he basically met her and they became like really good friends and like continued texting. Like this was not a romantic thing. It was a purely platonic, like friendly work thing. But he basically like noticed that she was getting a lot of roles. And he was like, hey, like what happened? Like, what did you do to break out? And she said, I did this 2002 movie called Online. It's 2 words, Online. And it seems like a vignette movie about, like webcamming type stuff. But she has a scene in it that is just apparently like really, 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 really striking. And I guess a lot of agents got a hold of it. And he was like, oh. So then he got the movie, which is apparently kind of hard to find. And he saw it and was like, oh, this is fantastic. So when he was writing this for the first group of girls, he was like, okay, Vanessa's going to be like the main character for this. But he didn't know if she was going to take it because he talks a lot about how he writes the character first, like how he has a lot of actors and actresses that he wants to work with, but he won't, like, if they don't fit the character, he's not going to do it. But in this case, he was like, he wrote the character, he gave her a Brooklyn background, just like Vanessa Ferlito, and he was like, well, if you say no, I will change this, because I'm not going to have her be from Brooklyn again. But, like, he just wrote this part for her, and she was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to be in a Quentin Tarantino movie.
I mean, honestly, right? Like, it's one of those things where he makes so few films that if you find out he wants you probably are going to drop everything to try to be there.
Exactly. And so then we have other holdovers. So we have Sidney Poitier's daughter, Sidney Poitier.
Mm-hmm.
She auditioned for Vivica A. Fox's role in Kill Bill and didn't get the part, obviously. And then...
Oh, she would have been just a little too young, I think.
That's what I was thinking. But then here's the thing. I didn't know this. Quentin Tarantino directed the 2-part season 5 finale of CSI.
Yes, he did. Yeah, that's the one where we bury one of the people underground.
Okay, so basically she auditioned for a role in that and didn't get it, and he just kept trying to work with her again, and then basically was like, oh, like, I'm doing this
I'll
DJ
just
character.
Write a role for you.
Kind of, yeah, it wasn't in the same capacity that he wrote the roles for Zoe Bell and Vanessa Ferlito, but it was kind of like, oh, you are perfect for this role.
Right, okay.
And the same thing with Jordan Ladd. He knew her through Eli Roth. Jordan Ladd also auditioned for that CSI episode, but didn't get the role. So he was like, oh, I want to work with you. So she gets the party girl of Shanna in this. Oh, I'm sorry, Shanna in this movie.
God damn it, Shanna Banana.
Shanna Banana. And then Rose McGowan did audition for Pam. This was not a case of, oh, she's in Planet Terror, just put her in Death Proof. She did audition for this role.
It's kind of wild that is the case because, Marley Shelton shows up as the character from Planet Terror. So I thought we were just doing a tradesy with a couple of actors.
Not at all. Okay, so the rest of the second group of girls. So interestingly enough, Rosario Dawson and Tracy Thoms had just acted together in the Rent movie because that would have been 2006. Also, though, okay, have you ever heard of this 2007 rape revenge movie that's called Descent? Just Descent, not The Descent, with Rosario Dawson and Tracy Thoms and Vanessa Ferlito.
No.
So, okay, I looked this up.
Did you try to track it down?
I mean, it's not hard to track down. Like, I remember when this came out, but I thought it was just like a drug spiral movie. And then I looked it up today and I was like, oh, this is a rape revenge movie, which I was not expecting. But yeah, so she does that rape revenge movie. They basically... Dawson and Toms went into audition together because they were just really good friends by this point, and they were like, yeah, just take us or leave us, whatever.
Oh my God. Was that a Rent reference?
Oh my God. It wasn't intentional, but yes, it was. So Dawson was pretty much an instant sell, and then Toms comes from the stage. She's a theater actress, and Tarantino was really impressed with her ability to adapt to his dialogue. He said that theater directing stage actors is different, not necessarily easier, but I got the impression he liked working with stage actors on film more than film actors because it's just they go through a different process.
Right. And also, this is where I once again climb up on my soapbox and say Tracy Thoms is also one of the supporting characters in Brian Fuller's Wonderfalls, and everyone should please go and check that out. One season wonder, and it's amazing.
Yes. Then for the final one for Lee, the character who really gets the short shift in this movie. So Tarantino, for Lee, he said, because I work with, characters first, blah, 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 I'm actually not going to make Lee a very fleshed out character. I'm going to leave her kind of generalized, and that way I can use any actor to fill the slot and she can make it her own. So it was kind of a more for the actress than for him kind of a scenario. And he just said that Mary Elizabeth Winstead came in and just became like who he envisioned Lee to be.
Okay. I mean, I like that story for both of them, but I will confess that the first time I watched this movie, I felt underwhelmed by what Lee's story arc does not amount to. And then watching this, I'm a little bit more generous because I know where it's going, but still, it just feels so weird that we just dropped that character off and then she's out of the movie.
It confounds me every time. It's not really a knock against the film, but I'm also kind of like, well...
It's like, just shoot a kind of end credit sequence where they circle back and pick her up and she's beating the shit out of that farmer dude or something. I don't know.
I'm sure that like leaving her behind is something I'm sure we will talk a lot about. I'm sure a lot of viewers, specifically female ones, will have very, very, very strong thoughts about the way these three friends just leave the fourth one with this guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it. This movie... I mean, we'll talk a lot about the feminism, but it is interesting how every male character that we see on screen, like some of the ones that get referenced aren't great, but of course we don't actually get to know anything about them because they're never seen. But all the men that are seen on screen are uniformly shit.
Absolutely. And granted, these girls, I mean, all of them, they're not like bad people, but they're not like the most like stellar role models of upstanding society.
Well, yeah, and that's where I kind of want to talk about some of the feminism, because I appreciate that they are fallible human beings and not perfect victims.
Now, for stuntman Mike, in a 2021 interview with Joe Rogan, Tarantino said, I know, Tarantino said that his first choice for stuntman Mike was actually Mickey Rourke, who did want to do this movie.
Could see it. Absolutely.
Well, so Mickey Rourke's agent started fucking with him in terms of money. And so Tarantino basically said, look, here's the offer. Let us know if Mickey Rourke's going to do it by this date and time. And the agent let the deadline pass. And so Quentin Tarantino was like, fine, you're out. And again, this would have been like, 2 years after Sin City. So like Rourke had already worked with Robert Rodriguez. Actually,
yeah.
Shit. Oh, never mind. No, I was going to say, didn't Tarantino direct Rourke's scene? But no, that was Benicio del Toro's scene.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, so Robert Rodriguez was the one who suggested Kurt Russell, whom Tarantino had only met once before, but he was like, oh, yes.
Obviously.
Absolutely. Now, yes, the Grindhouse version of Death Proof is about 88 minutes long with credits, whereas the solo unrated version of it is an hour and 53 minutes long. So it's a full 25 minutes longer. And
yeah.
Tarantino said he cut the movie down almost to the point of incoherence, referring to the Grindhouse cut. Cut it down to the bone, took all the fat off to see if it could still exist, and it did still work, in his eyes. There are a lot of minor cuts or extra dialogue in scenes. However, I will say the only notable scenes where it's like, oh, we have several minutes being added back into this movie. It is the lap dance sequence, which honestly I love. I get it. Like I get why we cut it. We don't have to have it there, but I love that scene.
It does play very well when you get to see the full thing.
But the other one is basically the first like 11 minutes of the second half of the film. So we get like when we cut over to Tennessee after checking in with the Block family at the hospital. It's when we kind of meet the black and white section where, they're looking for the magazines and shit like that. Like all of that is director's cut footage. And again, I get why you would cut it, because in the film, normally what would happen is you would cut from the Ranger Earl McGraw stuff directly to the shot of stuntman Mike photographing the new group of girls, but then you lose that first scene before they pick up Zoe. And again, you can cut it because we get another, we're all eating and hanging out scene and talking later.
Right.
But I don't know. We can discuss the necessity of this scene when we get to the plot.
Absolutely. Yeah, because this was the first time I had seen that, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. Like, we're definitely getting some different stuff out of these characters. And especially if you feel like, oh, well, Lee is a nothing character, this does help to flesh her out a bit more.
Exactly. And you have a nice moment of her singing that song. Like, we don't get that in the Grindhouse cut. So, yeah. I get why it was cut.
Sure.
But yeah, so the total budget for this is $30 million, whereas, the total Grindhouse budget was anywhere from $53 to $67 million. Again, we had a kind of point with that last time. But
right.
Again, released over the Easter weekend, April 6th, 2007, opened in 4th place with $11.5 million, placing behind Blades of Glory and Meet the Robinsons, both in their second week of release. So it goes on to gross, again, this is the Grindhouse, gross $25 million nationally and like $380,000 internationally for a worldwide total of $25.4 million. Again, against that $53 to $67 million budget. So as we said, they split this release up for the international release. So whereas us Americans got Grindhouse, overseas it was Planet Terror or Death Proof.
Right. Okay, so wait, so did you just tell me the number for Death Proof? How much it made internationally?
No. So yeah, so all of the 25 point whatever million, that was all just for Grindhouses because it was 300,000 internationally for Grindhouse, and I think that's because they started the international rollout and then decided to split it after the fact.
Them when it wasn't working.
Yeah. So Death Proof on its own grossed $31 million overseas, and for comparison, Planet Terror on its own grossed $11.4 million overseas. So this did much better than Planet Terror overseas. Yeah.
Interesting. I do wonder how much of that is the Quentin Tarantino name versus the Robert Rodriguez name.
That's what I was thinking too.
No shade to Robert Rodriguez or his fans, but I do feel like it's just a bit more of a milestone when Tarantino releases a film.
But I also think that you see a lot more European film influences in Tarantino films than you see in Rodriguez films. Like, I think Rodriguez films they're geared more towards like Mexico and things like that,
Right. Okay.
Things like that. Countries like that. Oh my God. It's not European.
Things like that. Mexico, as opposed to things like that. Europe.
But still, reviews were positive. Grindhouse has an 84% of Rotten Tomatoes as the collective score and an average score of 7.4 out of 10. Whereas Death Proof on its own has a 65% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 5.7 out of 10.
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised. And I do wonder how many people thought this was going to be an exciting car chase slasher film from Tarantino. And then what they get is, why are there so many ladies talking in my action film?
Maybe so. But Letterboxd users have given Grindhouse a 7.4 out of 10, but Death Proof a 7.2 out of 10. So I think people have come around on this film, but I will say, in a 2011 roundtable conversation with The Hollywood Reporter, Tarantino said, and I quote, "Death Proof has got to be the worst movie I ever made."
Oh,
I know. And for a left-handed movie, that wasn't so bad. I don't know what that means, left-handed movie. Maybe say,
I think it's a bit of a slander, like, you know how...
like the redheaded stepchild, it's like, oh, like left-handed. But like, what does that mean? Like, what was he like hampered in some way doing this, or was it the double feature part of it that he's like, oh, it wasn't fully my movie, it was our movie, so I don't know.
Yeah, it could be that. It could just be, oh, this is more of a novel exercise than most of my films. You know, as you said, this isn't really the way he makes his films. He usually spends years thinking about them, whereas this one came together far more quickly. So maybe he's just saying this is an unusual venture for me compared to the other films.
And I don't even necessarily disagree with that. I just get really up in arms when people are like, oh, this is Tarantino's worst movie, which granted,
that is... that is a good hurdle. Like, even if you do want to say, oh, this is the worst film he's made, nearly every movie he's made is an absolute stunner. Like, I remember there were a lot of people who hated Jackie Brown back in the day. And guess what? All of those people, well, generalized statement, many people have come around on Jackie Brown. And I feel like a bunch of people will probably come around on Death Proof if they do give it a second chance.
Yeah, it just rubs me the wrong way to be like, oh, wow, Quentin Tarantino's most like feminist-leaning movie with his largest female cast is what he considers the worst one, you know?
Trace, I have to keep reminding you that we hate women.
I know.
And folks, that's not sarcasm. That's just a reflection of contemporary political attitudes.
But I will let me finish this quote. So he says, and
Sure.
for a left-handed movie, that wasn't so bad. So if that's the worst I ever get, I'm good. But I do think one of those out-of-touch, old, limp, flaccid dick movies costs you 3 good movies as far as your rating is concerned. And so I was like, well, are you now referring to this as an old, limp, flaccid dick movie? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that quote is baffling. Here's the thing. It sounds like he is disappointed in the performance of this film and also maybe the content. But yeah, that's frustrating.
So that's 2011 with The Hollywood Reporter. However, in 2023, he did an interview with a Spanish outlet called Ara. So I had to have this translated. But
Look at you with all the translations recently.
I know. All these fucking foreign outlets doing better work than the American ones.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, again, this is just 2 years ago, but Tarantino admitted that the tepid response to Death Proof brought him down to earth. And so again, I think you're right. I think it's because people generally didn't like it. And also when people were talking about Grindhouse, it was always, oh, Planet Terror is the more fun one. However,
right.
I also saw people saying, oh, like Robert Rodriguez made like this really great, like bad B movie, but like it's good. And Tarantino cheated and just made a good movie.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some of the stylistic elements as well, because it really caught my eye how I don't want to say that he lets go of the Grindhouse aesthetic the further the film progresses, but it definitely does feel like, oh, he's just made a more conventional car chase movie by the end of this film.
Exactly. So basically, though, he says, the tepid response to this brought me down to earth. And then he says, and I quote, it didn't do well at the box office. It wasn't well received. And that was a bit of a shock to my confidence. Then I started getting proposals from studios to direct other people's scripts. As if they thought, oh, he's down, so we can like give him other stuff to direct and he can add that Tarantino flair to make these scripts better. Right. But he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so 2 years later, he does Inglourious Bastards.
And wins an Oscar.
Which, and Inglourious Bastards is like top tier, like Tarantino for me. I love Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've only seen it the one time, and, I think like a lot of folks on the first time watch, what got me was the subversive element, how he plays with the familiar story to give you something new. And I'd be interested, because to me, that was such a selling feature of, oh, you're telling a story that I thought I knew, twisting it around, giving me something fresh. And then he kind of does it again with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Another really good film, but also part of me is just like, did you feel like you cracked a new formula and this is just the way you make movies now?
Well, because people also had way less of an issue with the changing of history in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood than they did with Inglourious Bastards. But I would argue maybe that's also just 10 years of difference and people like maybe almost expecting it to happen.
I think so. Yeah. And maybe it's just, okay, well, we educated them or prepared them with the first one and then they were used to it or ready for it with the second one. But I think people also just get savvier the more that you watch of a particular film director, and people were very familiar with Tarantino by that point. Like we're at the point where we're actually billing it as like the 9th film from Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, good luck if we ever see that 10th one. Who the fuck knows? But au revoir, Shoshana. Oh, you need to watch Inglourious Bastards again. It's so fucking good. I love it. It's not Kill Bill, but it's still really good.
Yes.
Okay, Joe, what happens in Death Proof?
Well, before you do that, do you want to talk some trailers?
Yes. Okay, so, just go down the list, huh?
Okay, well, let's start with Werewolf Women of the SS. So this is the Rob Zombie trailer, and rumor has it that he actually shot a full 30 minutes of this film and then agonized over how to cut it down. So
that would make sense because on the Grindhouse Blu-ray, it's only the Grindhouse Blu-ray of this, you can watch the an extended version of this. However, it is 5 minutes, so it's double the length of the final trailer. It's not 30 minutes.
Okay, so what do you think of this? Because outside of the Sherry Moon zombie-ness of it all, I think that this is fine. It's interesting how I think that this would work better for me as a trailer as opposed to a full film. And maybe that's just because we are seeing all the money shots and it's just so over the top, but I don't think I could watch a sustained like 90-minute run time of this.
Yeah, I think the general consensus is this is the weakest trailer.
It depends. I mean, you said that there's 3, and technically there's 4 if you want to count the one that played in Canada. So I would say Hobo with a Shotgun is the other one where I was like, oh, this trailer is not giving me enough of what I'm really looking for. But I've also never seen the film version of that, which of course does star Rutger Hauer.
Which I've heard is pretty fun. So in an interview with Rolling Stone, I'll just say this with Rob Zombies, and I think you can kind of put this this kind of says everything you need to know about the film. But he says, basically, I had 2 ideas. It was either going to be a Nazi movie or a women in prison film, and I went with Nazis. There are all those movies like Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, Fraulein Devil, and Love Camp 7. I've always found that to be the most bizarre genre, but I was getting very conceptual in my own mind with it. A lot of these times these movies would be made like, well, I've got a whole bunch of Nazi uniforms, but I've got this Chinese set too, so we put them together, and that's how we get the Fu Manchu, Nicolas Cage part of this trailer.
Yeah, which is admittedly delightful if you enjoy Nicolas Cage, because you're just like, oh, it's so racially insensitive, but it's also very on par for what we're doing. And again, like we always have to remind ourselves, these are meant to be offensive in some ways because they're exploitation films. So when he pops up, it's kind of delightful. And also you think, yeah, very fitting. That's as much as I need.
Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of, I don't know, maybe feel free to disagree with me. I don't get a lot of laughs out of this trailer. Like, yes, the Nicolas Cage reveal is there, but and it's fun to watch Udo Kier just go full, German. I mean, he is German, obviously, but just caricature German.
Yeah, but it's a one joke premise, right?
Yes, and I will say that watching it stretch to 5 minutes doesn't make it any more funny.
Oh, dear. Okay.
I mean, I think it's fine, but to me, it is the weakest trailer.
Okay. So, Don't, the Edgar Wright. This is my favorite. It was when I first saw Grindhouse in the theater, and watching it again, I was just like, yeah, this trailer kills. It is so fucking funny to me.
I agree. And I think also brevity is the soul of wit. This is the shortest trailer out of all of them. And I think there's a reason why. Truthfully, thinking back on it, I was like, I don't really remember I just remember they say don't a lot, but I don't remember anything else about it.
So many times. One of the things that I really like is how it feels like the film is actually shifting genres as you go. Like it starts as a very obvious kind of gothic, something is going on a la Haunting or The Haunting of Hill House. And then it shifts and it almost starts to become more of a zombie ghoul film, almost like The Evil Dead.
Yes, and it's interesting. You're so close to pinpointing exactly what he was trying to do with this, but he was producing this in the style of a 1970s Hammer horror film.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes, which it's the Britishness of it all probably clues that in. But also, there's so many people in this trailer that literal Jason Isaacs in here. Blink and you'll miss it. Matthew McFadden from Succession, Lucy Punch, and of course we have Simon Pegg and Nick Frost because this is 2 years after Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah. It's funny. I definitely caught more of them when I was watching it this time around, but back in 2007, I truly don't think I recognized most any of them.
No, I mean, the only one I really recognized was Lucy Punch because I think she gets the most look, this is an actress you might recognize on the screen, but that's also because she was in Hot Fuzz. But everyone else has barely a second of just looking at something before it cuts away.
Yeah, or getting a cleaver to the head or something.
But I agree with you. I do think actually after watching all these again, I do think Don't's my favorite one, and maybe it's because we have a Thanksgiving movie now. But yeah, this Don't trailer just really worked for me.
Yeah, it's so fun and clever. Okay, so Thanksgiving, what do we think of this one? As you said, we now have a film of this, and we actually have a franchise of this new film coming out this Thanksgiving, folks.
Absolutely. No, I still think this is very, very, very fun. And this is probably, I was going to say it's the funniest one, but Edgar Wright's is pretty funny.
I would say that this is there's definitely funny moments to it, but this to me is also the most believable as an actual trailer.
Yes.
I saw that they were referencing a lot of the classic 80s, April Fool's Day, Graduation Day, that kind of stuff. And if you are familiar with those films, this is so fucking spot on.
Yeah, no, 100%. Again, this is a great trailer. Part of me still wishes the movie we got was more in line with this, but it's fine. But it's fine. We also get, again, Jordan Ladd's in this one again. She's the girl that's giving him a blowjob in the car before he gets decapitated.
Yeah, I read trivia, and I'm freely pulling from the Wikipedia, folks, but it says on the Wikipedia that this trailer was in danger of giving Grindhouse an NC-17 rating because of all of the beheading/decapitations. And Eli Roth had to kind of say, let me show it to you in the context of the film because I think you'll understand what I'm trying to go for. Like, this is playing for laughs, not for scares. And they apparently got it, and we were in the clear.
Which, wow, Eli Roth can change the mind of the MPAA.
Apparently you just had to say, it's supposed to be funny. Not scary.
Which that's like this. Like, also, how could you watch that trailer and not like get the humor in that? Like, it's very tonally consistent, I feel like, but
you would think so. Yeah. And even the point where it's like the guy is getting head and loses his head. Come on. The joke writes itself.
Absolutely. Which, I mean, granted, had Hellbent not existed, maybe we would, like, that would be more of a clever kill. But nevertheless, no mainstream audiences were watching Hellbent in 2007.
Sadly, no.
But, good trailers, though. Very fun time. I wish we got something like this again, but we'll never get something like this again.
No, we will absolutely not. I mean, but if you think about it, the trailer to feature film ratio was pretty solid because we did end up with 3 out of 5.
Yeah, we're just missing Don't and Werewolf Women of the SS, which, we'll never get Werewolf Women unless Rob Zombie just really wants to do it. But like, Don't is something that I think easily could do with all of those people still.
I would love to see Edgar Wright actually take on something like that. And don't tell me Last Night in Soho is equivalent. I will punch you into the moon. Like
pure straightforward genre, not that. I get what you're saying. As someone who likes Last Night in Soho, I totally get what you're saying.
And as someone who doesn't, go and listen to our Patreon episode on it.
Mm-hmm.
This week's episode is sponsored by Neon's film, Presence. Directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Kapp, Presence is a thrilling new ghost story about a family that moves into a new home only to discover that they are not alone. Starring Lucy Liu, Chris Sullivan, and Julia Fox, Presence has been hailed as one of the scariest movies you'll see this year. Experience it in theaters on January 24th.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Bored with your boring cardio? Stop pedaling that snooze cycle to Nowheresville and try some cardio that's actually fun. Supernatural Fitness, available on MetaQuest. Isn't that right, Jane Fonda?
Cardio will never be boring again.
Sweat to the beat of thousands of chart-topping songs inside stunning virtual landscapes.
Bet your stationary bike can't do that.
Visit GetSupernatural.com and join the next fitness revolution. Supernatural VR Fitness, only on MetaQuest. Rated T for Teen.
Okay, let's talk about Death Proof, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, so we open, as we mentioned, with Tarantino's trademark signature. We've got a shot of women's feet, and it's on a car dash, so it's really just foot porn for OnlyFans to open this movie. And we do get the opening credits as well as the title, Quentin Tarantino's Thunderbolt. Oh, wait, sorry. Death Proof.
Which again is something that I guess would happen often in these kind of like Grindhouse double features of the 70s where they would change titles to make them more appealing and just like splice it out.
Sure.
But enjoy that because we're not going to get many more instances of these kind of like gimmicky Grindhouse like footage things in this movie.
Not a ton, no. Before we do progress any further, I want to bring in one of a couple of sources that I'm going to reference for this. So it's Lex Brusco's piece, Death Proof and the Contradictions of Quentin Tarantino's Strong Women for Paste. So Brusco says, the film's complicated relationship with women starts in its first seconds. An attractive set of feet dangle out of a car window, backdropping the opening credits introducing the girls, in quotation marks. These women are sectioned off and commodified in the opening credits, labeled as a group using their gender as the only identifier, but they are also top billed, so their importance is made all the more obvious from the start. And I guess I thought that was interesting because there are definitely a bunch of, let's just admit it, objectifying male gazy shots in this movie. And I think you rightfully said earlier that this is an exploitation film. So part of that is to be expected. Tarantino is playing into the ideas of that. But I'm also like folks, we're obviously recording this in advance. So I'm mid-edit on our substance episode in which we talk about using the male gaze, but subverting the male gaze with correlate far shit. So this is... I don't know. It was very interesting to watch these movies so close together because part of me was like, I don't think that Tarantino is actually subverting the male gaze. I think he's just saying, well, this is par for the course with this kind of film.
Yeah, but I fully agree. And I also don't think that Tarantino was thinking to himself, oh, I'm going to make a feminist movie when he was making this movie. I think he was just like...
Really? You don't think so?
Do you do think so? Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so this is what I meant by we're going to have some conversations about the feminism, because I absolutely think that he is getting some things spot on. And then I think other times he's getting things really fucking wrong. Like, I actually think it's a very messy male approach to making a feminist film.
Yes. I mean, and here's the thing. Like, do I think this is a feminist film? I think there are plenty of feminist aspects to it.
Right.
I think the ending is a very feminist ending.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so I think you can walk out with that high of this ending, which again, like you do walk out on a high with this ending and say, oh my God, it was so feminist. But then we have to go back and look at some of this other stuff, especially in the first half of the film.
Yeah.
That's where some contradictions come into play. And so maybe you are right. Maybe he thought, maybe he thought to himself, I'm going to make a feminist film. I don't know. Based on all the interviews I've seen with Quentin Tarantino, I just don't ever know if messaging is really the first thing on his mind.
It's just that he is such an astute filmmaker, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like we've talked about, he's very deliberate. He seems to know exactly what he's referencing. Like he's very, very aware of film history and that kind of stuff. So I can't believe that he would just throw a bunch of shit on screen and say, it looks cool, I'm going to do it. Whereas I do sometimes get that feeling from Robert Rodriguez where he's like, I'm going to try to shock the pants off of my audience with this fun, cool, sometimes admittedly juvenile male thing.
I fully agree with you, but I also think that's why Rodriguez and Tarantino are such good buddies, because I think they have similar sensibilities about filmmaking. I just think, and again, no shade to Rodriguez, who has made plenty of films that I absolutely love. Yeah. I just think Quentin Tarantino is a better filmmaker than Robert Rodriguez. And so I also think that when he's creating something, he is saying, okay, well, I'm making this the way I want to make it, but he is well aware that people can interpret his films in any shape, way, or form. And so I almost wonder if he's like, well, I'm doing this how I want to do it. This is my version of my movie. Mm-hmm. But I'm not trying, I don't know, I'm not trying to impart a message out. People can pick up what they want from it based on what they get, because that's just how art is. Art is subjective. And maybe I'm thinking about Tarantino too much like this, but I don't know.
It's interesting, because, yeah, I guess to show my hand early on, early-ish in the episode, as we, rapidly approach the hour mark, I'm going to argue that I think the film is delivering a deliberate feminist message, but part of what it's doing is that it uses the break to shift that. So I think we get a very conventional depiction of women and the way that men treat them in the first half, and then we switch it up and it becomes incredibly feminist in the back half.
Okay. You know what? My ears are perked. I'm open to that.
Okay, well, let me continue our journey through the film then, since we've made it one scene so far.
As we watch Vanessa Ferlito hold her vagina as she runs into Jungle Julia's apartment because she has to, and I quote, take the world's biggest fucking piss.
Yeah. So once again, we're shooting women at crotch level, but it's for the gag, right?
It's kind of funny too. I mean,
it's kind of funny. Yeah.
I fully believe that Tarantino would also be talking to all these women beforehand about how he's going to shoot them.
Yeah. Like the fact that he said, okay, does it sound like he was making an argument? Oh, I've got a bunch of female friends, so I know how to write women. But also, I have to assume that he would be getting feedback from his actors about what they're comfortable shooting. I would hope that it's not just, oh yeah, I'll do whatever you want. Quentin because I'm in a fucking Tarantino movie, which we could be wrong, but also I've never heard of allegations about sexual harassment apart from his obsession with feet.
And I will say, I mean, granted, like, you know, anytime I see women talk about him, like it's always like around the time the film they're in is coming out, and I totally get that. But with the exception of that, you know, that car crash from Kill Bill and that had Uma Thurman like going on, like we learned about it years after the fact. But like every time I see a female actor talk about Quentin Tarantino, it is always with the most love and respect. They think he's so fun to be around.
Right.
And so I don't know,
but
it always makes me like just nervous to talk about like unless, you know, there's been actual accusations. And again, like there haven't been anything against Quentin Tarantino, but there's plenty of comments around about how, you know, creepy Tarantino is. And, you know, the foot thing contributes to that, and I totally get it. But I don't know. I do think Quentin Tarantino is a weird person, but I don't think he's a predatory person.
Yeah, and I guess this is where we should probably ring the Weinstein bell just to acknowledge that obviously he had a very long-standing relationship, and this movie was made by Harvey and Bob.
Yes, but I do think Rodriguez had more of a hand in the Weinstein pop.
Yeah. Who knows, folks? Like, this is a lot of speculation and based on just the things that we've read and what people are saying, but obviously Hollywood is rife with predators, so always waiting to discover some horrible new truth.
I know. All the time, every day.
Yeah. Okay, so yes. So as these girls are sort of like, hey, Arlene, you're fresh in town. You're here for the weekend. It's very exciting. We're also getting glimpses of this very speaking of predators, this very predatory black car sort of cruising around. We do discover that this is set in the city of Austin, Texas.
Oh, Joe. I'm going to tell you right now, like, everyone, because I haven't lived in Austin for 2 years, but like Austin now is not the Austin of this film of 2007. So it was very nice to see a lot of old landmarks. Yes. Just, I mean, all over the place. I mean, like I watching this opening scene, I was like, oh, I've been there. I've been there. I've been there. Like they're just filming on Congress and later Burnett Road before we make that shit to Tennessee. But yeah, it was very heartwarming for this former Austinite to look at, oh, that's what Austin used to be before a bunch of tech bros and startups moved in and destroyed the city.
But the food scene is still great.
Yeah, it's still good. There you go.
Okay, so we see Julia as well as Arlene driving around with Shanna, who is played by Jordan Ladd. And Julia and Shanna are really bickering about whose responsibility it was to score the weed. And Arlene is trying to act like the moderator. Okay, so let's get this fun weekend vibe going and maybe decrease the animosity between the friends who see each other all the time and are probably a little bit more like, no, bitch, it was your turn.
Which also at the same time we learn, oh, they're not really fighting. This is their rapport.
Yes, but I think, and again, I'm going to bring some of the feminism back into this. It's one of those, okay, are these women supporting each other? Are they gently catty with each other? Like, I would argue that the way that Julia treats Arlene is not super great. Like, do I think it feels real and lived in? Yes. But also, like, you publicly told all of your radio listeners that your friend who is visiting for the weekend would give them a lap dance without even alerting her first. And is it a joke? Kinda, but also not really.
I mean, yeah, I think they say, they say it's kind of funny, I feel like, at some point in the film, but
I think they do. I don't think Arlene ever does.
Right. But we also learn that Julia's kind of a bully when we meet Rose McGowan's Pam character. Like, this is not a recent development for her, and yes, these girls all get along with her, but it seems like, this is... they like to fuck with each other quite a bit.
Yeah. And again, I would argue that does help to make them interesting. I'm not coming to this film hoping for, as I said, perfect victims or perfect survivors with the second group of girls. Like, I am interested in people who are real, who have flaws, who have issues within their friendship groups. But I could also see people saying, like, well, why aren't these girls treating each other a little bit nicer?
Right. And unfortunately, this is also, I'm sorry, this just is 2007.
Yeah.
I will say too, because we had this whole conversation happening in the car, and you can see continuity issues, which I'm going to just say they didn't care because this is Grindhouse movie, but like every time we're in the car, we're facing Jordan Ladd, out the window to her right, you can see like Lady Bird Lake, like Austin, like they're going over this bridge. But then whenever we do the reverse shot and we're looking at Julia, they're fully not on a bridge, just on the southern part of Congress Avenue.
Right. Yeah. We're clearly just driving around, and wherever we happen to be getting background shots, it's like, well, that's what it is.
Well, the funny thing is they're actually, because this bridge connects to Congress, so they're all on the same street. They're just on a different part of it.
Yeah. And I think part of this is that we're not actually meant to be paying attention to where they're driving, except for when we see a billboard, because that's what we're driving around doing. We are every time we see Jungle Julia. But really, this is our introduction to these girls, this relationship, and we're setting up the fact that, okay, tonight's going to be a bit of a party vibe. So we're going to go to Guero's, which is Mexican food, and then eventually we're going to do a girls' sort of slumber party at LBJ's cottage for the weekend.
Yeah, this is like LBJ. It's about an hour outside of Austin. But yeah, also, if y'all ever want to go, Guero's still exists in Austin, as does the Texas Chili Parlor, which is the bar we spend the rest of this first half in.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the interesting grindhousey elements is when the girls reach their final billboard, they honk, and we sort of see them start to go around the corner, and then the film does a bit of a jump cut, and we actually see stuntman Mike's car in its place. So this idea that we are going to come into conflict between the two because they are occupying the same space.
I like this too, because this feels like a very, I think any of these types of like these film error effects are on Tarantino's
They're in
part,
service of the story.
Very intentional, yeah, because this gives stuntman Mike almost this kind of like specter-like quality. He just appears out of thin air following these girls.
No, I really like this one.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we sat down for some drinks. This is where we are introduced to Marcy, who is played by Marcy Harriel. And she does the big reveal where, okay, Jungle Julia said what on the radio? I do enjoy this role play interlude where Marcy adopts a lower register in her voice and Arlene starts to really get into it. I think that this is a really great showcase for Ferlito. Like early on, this is giving us a sense of what she's capable of.
Oh, absolutely. And also to show that she's not a pushover, too, because when she kind of realizes what's going on, she then fucks with Julia, Like, oh, you think she got a big ass? Oh, it's not a black girl's ass. It's a big ass.
And her line delivery is very fun, like you did the right emphasis on the right syllable there. So
100%. And that's the thing is, we're probably like 20 minutes into this movie already, and we have just seen girls talking.
Just girls talking. Oh my God, it's passing the Bechdel test, Trace.
Well,
sort of.
Is it? Like, we're talking about men a lot in this movie.
Talking about men a lot, yes. But also talking about weekend plans and how we don't want men in them.
Well, yes, absolutely. I do like Marcy Harriel here. I wish she was in more of the movie because she has a very, like, striking face.
Yeah.
I will say Tarantino said he heard her audition and they had her do like the role play stuff, and he loved her Southern boy accent, so he rewrote this part specifically for her and renamed the character Marcy after seeing her audition.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's fun. We should also note that, just in case you worry that Tarantino isn't very literate, he is doing this Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Like, that is an integral component. Like, a male listener would have to remember a Robert Frost poem in order to secure himself a lap dance.
So the funniest thing to me is this. So, like, it's not really funny, but this is one of the first poems I remember knowing, because in first grade, we had to memorize this poem and present it to the class.
Oh, okay. So, it's a famous one, so it makes sense.
It's pretty famous. Yeah, more famous.
Oh. Okay, so we watch in a long shot as the ladies pour out of Guero's, and this is more or less our introduction to Stuntman Mike because he is watching them and he is chuckling at their antics. So initially, it definitely feels predatory and voyeuristic, but it seems like he is sharing in their enthusiasm. Like they're having a good time, he's having a good time, except we understand, he doesn't know these women.
Oh, absolutely. Also, what do we think of his little, do I want to call it a tick? I don't know. I feel like we really focus on him spraying eye drops in his eyes. And I was like, is it just meant to be a character quirk that he's just really obsessed with moisturizing his eyes?
There's a couple of pieces like this. There's a moment where he tries to sneeze and can't.
Oh, it's so funny.
It's so funny. And part of me was like, these, as you said, are quirks or just weird little character beats. And the more I started to reflect on the film, the more I think they're actually contributing to this male emasculation. Like, he is such a poser, but actually he has all of these conditions or things that just make him less than. And of course, we haven't even talked about the fact that he is facially, quote unquote, disfigured because he has a very prominent scar.
I didn't even think about it. You're 100% correct, because of course the big reveal at the end of the film, which we will discuss, is that he's a coward.
Oh God, yes. And it's so satisfying.
It's so satisfying. But I think that's what all these are. These are all these kind of like weird clues into like, he's a pushover. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, like he's doing a big male posture. He's trying to impress these women in the same way that these other guys who are hanging around the girls are. It's just that stuntman Mike is older. So they're kind of representing the two dichotomies, right? There's shitty older men, and then there's younger shitty men.
Well, this is also a movie too where like we don't learn why stuntman Mike does any of this. Like, outside of the fact that it just is fun, I guess. But like, yeah, so there's not really a lot of character development for Mike outside of what he tells people. And I think that like this isn't a scary movie per se, but I do think the idea of it is scary.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I think that this guy and what he wants to do and how he only seems to do it to young, attractive women that he stalks, that he takes photographs of, that he mows down in his car. Like, this is very much every woman's nightmare. Like, I've got a quote when we get to the Pam stuff, but this feels very much like, oh yeah, okay, you cannot trust a man because they could be nice, or they could be the guy who's standing you up at the bar, or they could be the guy who's going to actively try to kill you.
Well, and again, like, I don't want to hunt for a motive because there's clearly not a point to it, but like, I can see someone saying, oh, well, they were really mean to him in the bar, so he's just going after them as like revenge. But it's like, no, but he's been following them. Like, he has their pictures in his little the
visor.
The visor, yeah.
Yeah, like that to me. And we get this really early, right? When he checks his dry eyes and he puts in the eye drops, we see he's already got the pictures. And we know from Arlene that she has spotted him following them all day. So, like, he has been working up to this.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Shout out to the crazy babysitter twins who we do get to see going into the Texas chili parlor.
I was literally waiting. I was about to be like, did you spot the crazy babysitter twins?
Yeah. And of course, like, they get nothing to do. They literally just walk into the bar. But it's another carryover piece where it's not an Easter egg. It's just really kind of, both directors know the same people. They worked on the same movie in two different parts.
I will say, though, like, because they did film this on location. So they were in Guero's. They were in the Texas chili parlor. And when I was 21, I went to all of these locations for my birthday because I was like,
of course you did.
It was like my second year in Austin. I was like, I'm 21. I'm going to go to these bars, blah, blah, blah.
Why not?
The Texas chili parlor is tiny, and
it makes it look really big.
It looks huge. Also, maybe they had a parking lot in 2007. They definitely don't anymore. Like, you have to park. It's street parking there. So I think this is a case where, I don't know, maybe the parking lot got replaced with another building, or maybe the parking lot was something else. I don't know.
We made a parking lot with movie magic.
Yeah, but yeah, go get Texas chili parlor, y'all. But when you walk in, it is tiny.
Okay, things to expect. Here we go. All right, so we see images of the girls dancing, drinking, they're smoking. Julia steps out of the bar so that she can call Lena Frank, who is played by Monica Staggs, and she's texting a guy named Chris Simonson. And we hear a complete shift in the music over these sequences, which make us think that this is going to become important, that Julia's romantic life is going to be a focal point of the film. No.
And it's not, we never meet Chris.
No, we don't. But we still understand that he is a piece of shit because he will stand her up on this date.
But yeah, this is a seemingly just like completely random event because, this means nothing except the fact I do think it's having the effect of trying to soften Julia a bit. I mean, that's that shift in music score that you're talking about. But I don't know,
because she is, quote unquote, the most aggressive of the girls. And I feel uncomfortable saying that because we're dealing with a pretty stacked cast of diversity, right? Like, we clearly didn't want 8 white girls in this movie.
Yeah.
And I always feel very uncomfortable when we have Black actresses in particular who have a bit of an edge to them or attitude, because I really truly do think that we're still in a day and age, unfortunately, where we're facing the angry Black woman.
Right. And see, I don't get that.
I don't think we go quite that far, but she is very much assertive, right? Like when she talks about her rise to fame, as you mentioned, she maybe was a bit of a bully to Pam, or maybe Pam is a bit of a like hangers on, like she wanted to be Julia's friend and Julia didn't give her the time of day. We get both sides, but it's very clear that Julia, like, she had to make herself, like she is a self-made woman. And with that comes a certain, like, when people like Stuntman Mike walk up to her and she doesn't know you, sure, she'll offer you a J, but she'll also tell you to kind of gently fuck off because she's having a party tonight.
Yeah, whenever Tarantino was talking to Poitier about this role, he basically said, like, who I am in the movie world, that is who Julia is in the music world. She knows everything about every song ever written.
Yeah. And I love that moment where she's in the car right before the girls get killed and she calls in and says, I want to hear this fucking song. And then she's got the whole Tarantino-esque diatribe about how if that guy had to join the band, it would have been called this. And that's the Tarantino dialogue that we just know and love. But I really like Poitier in this role. Like, I think Jungle Julia is a great character.
I love her, and I absolutely love that Dave D. Dozy Beaky Mitch and Titch song.
It's so fun, right? Like, if I was going to do an audition and I was trying to be acerbic, which I'm most certainly not on most of these recordings, I would love to do something like that because it is fast, it is fun, it is catchy.
Ooh, okay. Do you have a favorite piece of music in this movie? Or is it that one?
Ooh, I do think it's the one where they get in the car. Yeah.
Okay, so mine's a toss-up. But of course, if you're watching Grindhouse, it is the Dave D. Dozy Beaky Mitch Titch song, Hold Tight. But
right.
I love the coasters down in Mexico that plays during the lap dance scene. Like,
that is a really good one.
That song so much. Like, when the bridge happens and like,
Well, especially when you get to see this whole kind of unedited, I mean, it's still edited, but when you get to see so much more of it than in Grindhouse, it truly does play well with the musicality.
This was a choreographed dance, I think. It shows.
Yeah. Ferlito has the moves.
Oh, she's so good. This is a great lap dance scene. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. We should note that there is a director cameo for Quentin Tarantino. He plays bartender Warren. So he sends over shots of chartreuse. And this feels like Tarantino unable to help himself. Like, did you know that this is the only liquor that's named after a color?
100%. But again, like, compare this to his cameo in, well, it's not even a cameo. He's a character in Planet Terror.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm giving him more leeway here because I'm like, okay, well, like, you know, he didn't write his dialogue in Planet Terror as he's talking about like raping Rose McGowan.
Right.
But and he could have done something because he has a knack of especially incorporating very racist dialogue into his characters, like that he plays.
Yes,
so
he does.
This was a very inoffensive Tarantino guest spot.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think if you didn't, for some reason, know who Tarantino was, you would say, this feels like a bit of a weird, quirky character to just sort of show up for a couple of seconds, and you would be right in that regard. But in terms of the overall impact on the film, Warren is inoffensive.
Yeah, and again, he even like restrains himself sometimes too, because like whenever Pam asks him like, "Oh, what does Stuntman Mike do?" He's a stuntman, but like that's off screen. Like, you don't even cut to Tarantino saying that line.
It's true. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Arlene. She goes out to smoke and she does spot the car in the lot again. And you can tell that it's freaking her out to make the visual connection. Like, I've seen that car.
Yeah.
And why is it here again?
Also, like, a heavy emphasis on main characters smoking in this movie. Like, really, really big one.
Yeah, I mean, never surprising, right? Because we even have our own in-universe brand of cigarettes for Quentin Tarantino.
That's true. What do you think about this Nate guy that I want to make out?
I do really enjoy this sequence, if only because it shows us how capable Arlene is. Like you mentioned, the girls do spend a lot of time talking about their sex lives, both this group as well as the second group. And part of it is I really like the frankness. And as I said, the guys are also all kind of shit. So Nate, who is played by Omar Doom, he's not a bad guy, but he's just such a boy, right? So this
Yeah.
idea that she says, okay, yeah, we can do 6 minutes, but no whining, no pleading. When I say it's over, it's done. And he just yes ma'ams her because it's what he wants, but she's so firmly in control. That to me, again, it's advancing this sort of feminist, sexual, I don't know, just very in control narrative in this first half.
Yeah, absolutely. These are not like just like weak women that you can just walk over. Like, they are strong female characters.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about our fallible male antagonist. Trace, did you suffer with the audio,
Oh my
with the
God.
Foley for these nachos?
Were you not? Like, again,
It
go
was
back
so
to
gross.
the substance.
In my notes, it's just so gross.
But, like, go back to the substance. Like, how am I watching 2 movies with these asshole guys just engulfing nachos with their mouths? Like, it is wild.
Yeah, I mean, which is worse, nachos or shellfish?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I'm thinking, like, he's dipping in, like, cheese or something. Oh, never mind. It's all gross. It's these close-up shots of these just, like,
Yes.
Food in mouth. Blech.
He seems to have no awareness of how he looks, or maybe he just doesn't care. But I did think it was kind of amusing that we've got the Eli Roth character, Dov, who is mocking him. So Mike is not, he's not the grizzled old man that younger guys look up to and say, oh, there's somebody with, pussy power or something.
Right.
It's very, ew, what is this guy doing? He's a source of mockery.
Which is so funny because he's just eating fucking nachos.
Yeah, but he's a slob.
Well, a little bit. But I mean, he's also in a fucking like dive bar. So, I mean,
Wow. Yeah.
It's fine.
Also, nachos in a dive bar. My God, that's every Tuesday for me. This is what my volleyball team does after we play.
100, yeah. Every dive bar has at least one really, really good dish.
Yes, and it should be something probably deep fried.
Probably, yeah. Just you got to get all the bacteria out.
So important to note that Stuntman Mike is overhearing their conversation as well, and they're basically talking about, okay, what shots can we give the girls to get them so drunk that they will agree to let us come and essentially fuck them at the lake house this weekend.
Yeah, Eli Roth is probably the most despicable non-murdering man in this movie.
I mean, it's Eli Roth. What do we expect?
Okay. This is not going to make anyone who hates Eli Roth like him at all. But like, because every trailer has the making of the trailer. And it's like 5 or 10 minutes of just a making of.
Right.
You can watch them shooting the topless girl on the trampoline in the Thanksgiving trailer.
Right.
And he has them go for a second take, and he literally looks at the guy, I'm assuming his cinematographer next to him, and goes, "What? I've got a naked girl on a trampoline. You think I'm not going to do 2 takes?"
Oh, wow.
I know. I was like, Eli Roth, no!
Just not helping yourself in any capacity.
At all.
Fucking hell. Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, speaking of women who have been objectified by men, let's talk about Rose McGowan's Pam, who is introduced as a dirty hippie.
Or she's a skinny fake blonde bitch.
I do enjoy how Julia just has no time or patience.
Just,
and, it pays off when we learn that they do have a history. They were in school together, and I don't know. This is confusing to me because what we learn of the backstory, I could not help but feel like there was some gross racism in the description that Pam was giving of Julia.
There may have been. I mean, well, because she does that line where she's kind of explaining to Mike, like, what this would happen. But then she has that microaggression. I'm sorry, I'm built like a girl, not like a black man.
Exactly that. That was the line I was thinking of. I was just like, I think there's only one way to interpret this, and it is not good for the character of Pam.
Yeah, but then you're like, well, Quentin Tarantino is the one writing it, and Quentin Tarantino has very specific dialogue about black people in most of his movies.
Yeah, I truly don't know what to make of that, especially when we get to Tracy Thomas's character Kim in the second half. It is every other word is the N-word, and I'm like, it's fine when she says it because she's allowed to as she wants to, but we know that it's Quentin Tarantino who wrote this because he is very specific about the dialogue. And I'm just like I remember watching The Hateful Eight and the number of times that Samuel L. Jackson says the N-word. I was just like, can we not.
It's honestly a competition for who says the N-word more in Pulp Fiction. Is it Samuel L. Jackson in his, like, you know, a lot of screen time in that movie? Or is it Quentin Tarantino in his one scene in that movie that says the N-word more? But it's interesting because
again, like, I'm just friends with black people. That's the vibe it gives off. And I'm like, I get it. Like, you have clearly made connections within the black community because you always have diversity in his films. Always, always, always. And yet I'm just like, and you're still a fucking white dude. Just calm it down.
It's a thing where, again, like, because even when talking about Tracy Thoms' character in this movie, he says, "Oh, like, she's basically like the female Samuel L. Jackson of this movie. Like, that's what she is."
Interesting. Okay.
And so, but again, I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, like, I'm sure him and Samuel L. Jackson have shot the shit a lot. Like, maybe he's also one of those people that, like, in that circle of friends, he has permission to use that word. You know, I don't know.
Or maybe he doesn't say it. He only writes it because then he's writing for the people.
Well, and that's the thing. And that's why the Pulp Fiction one is always the weirdest to me. Because, again, he casts himself as this character that does just say the N-word a lot. So it's like, okay, well, are you casting yourself as this character and writing it just so you can say it then in the film if you can't say it in real life? I don't know. It's all a little weird, but
it's all a little weird.
That is the Tarantino that we have.
It's what we've got. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Mike propositioning Julia, because you mentioned earlier that some people read this as, well, they dismiss him, and that's why he acts out the way he does. And we've already said we don't believe that because he's clearly been trailing them for way longer than this interaction.
Right.
I also just don't think that they treat him badly. It's more like if you're at the bar or the club and somebody kind of comes up and everybody in the group just says, no, this is our thing right now and not your thing.
Yeah.
That's the vibe I get.
It's this is fascinating to me because, yeah, it's a thing where, like we both been in bars before, and it's also because this is kind of like a smoking circle. Granted, it's a pot circle, but, like, I have met so many people by using my cigarette break to go outside, and like if I didn't have a cigarette, like, go bum a cigarette from someone, I end up talking to them.
It is a communal thing.
But granted, at the same time, like, I know when to leave because you can tell when they're just giving you a cigarette to get you the fuck away from them, or if it is more of a communal thing. If it's like, oh yeah, let's all sit and talk while we smoke our cigarettes, and there's not a specific etiquette I think that needs to be followed, but to me it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you're at this kind of like chill bar in Austin, like you're outside in the patio, a public space, and you want to talk to someone, but also, like, you know, maybe they were in this private conversation. I see both sides.
Okay. I appreciate that perspective. As somebody who has only smoked a couple of times, I don't have that level of experience with it. So
yeah, I mean, again, like, it's long time ago. Everyone, don't smoke, don't do that. But yeah, that's it's a very social. It was a very social thing for me in my 20s.
Sure, yeah, it's not always a bad way to meet people.
But that being said, though, if I was in a group of my 20-something gay friends and this 56-year-old man walked up and just started talking to us, well, that's probably happened before. Actually, I don't know. Whatever.
Right, and you might just say, oh, the vibe's a little different now.
Yeah. But I don't think they're being mean to him, but they are snickering at him.
A little bit. Yeah. Okay, so he does get the message. He goes back inside. This is where he and Pam really start to, I'm not going to say connect. They have a conversation because she's looking for a ride home. He offers and is vouched for by, yes, the Quentin Tarantino bartender character.
Who's Stuntman Mike? He's a stuntman.
Yeah. There's a couple of lines like that are pretty straightforward. Like, what's a cheerleader movie? A movie about cheerleaders.
I love that. Rosario Dawson has some really good fun in that scene.
Truly, yes. So we do get a little bit more about Mike's backstory here. We learn that he has been working as a stunt driver for a number of films, but these girls and Pam have no idea what he's talking about. So this is a little inside baseball. This is where we try to get the lap dance from Arlene outside, but I do love this line where he says, it's the scar, isn't it? And she says, it's not the scar, it's your car.
Which I love that rhyme, intentional or not.
Oh, you gotta think it's intentional, right? I believe this was in the trailer.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Because the trailer for Grindhouse didn't really give you a lot of the plot of either movie. It was just a lot of footage. And so I think that was also probably a mistake with the marketing for it. But
yeah.
But yeah, I actually am a little surprised we don't. Well, I was going to say we don't shoot more of this car. And maybe it's because we're saving it for the reveal when Pam finally steps into it.
I think so. Yeah, because until we actually see her get in, and it's like a point of view shot of the fact that there isn't really even a seat for her to sit in. It's there, but he has to move it down.
Yeah.
You think that this is just a regular kind of muscle car.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. We don't really realize at this point that it's a stunt car.
Right, yeah. Before we get to that, though, we should talk a little bit more about this lap dance now.
Oh, my God. I mean, it's just, this song in Mexico.
So I'm going to bring in a new reference. Daniel Quinn's A Feminist Reading of Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof for Medium. And Quinn says, the appeal of stuntman Mike's character upon his initial appearance isn't his ability to seduce, deceive, or terrorize his female victims. Tarantino plays on the predatory underpinnings of masculinity itself as a social construct when he invites us to revel in Mike's murderous rampage before the end of Act 1. So Quinn has a generalized reading of this, like kind of compares the first part to the second part. And this ended up helping me to kind of crack that idea of, okay, the film does shift and do something different in the second half. Like I've heard and seen some people refer to this as, oh, it's a reset. It feels like a gentle homage to something like Psycho, where we thought we were going to follow these four and then we get rid of them and then we have to start the whole engine up again. But Quinn is interested also in how in this first half, it seems like Mike is adhering to this traditional definition of kind of grizzled masculinity, right? Like he's definitely in stark contrast to these shitty young dudes who more or less just want to date rape the girls, right?
Yeah. So he seems tame by comparison.
Just like a safer option, even though we know that he is the danger, right? Like from the very first instance, we understand that Mike is the person the girl should be the most worried about.
Right.
But that shifts, like any kind of adulation we may feel for what Mike does. Like we don't like the fact that he kills the girls, but we're excited by the violence. And in the second half, when he attacks the new set of girls, that doesn't carry over because at this point, we're actually too firmly aligned with them as opposed to him. So we're actively rooting for him to fail in the second half, whereas we're interested to see what he's going to do in the first half.
See, that's interesting because I feel like the first time you watch this, though, you don't know it's split into halves. Like, I mean, I guess maybe you might know. Because like, well, I was like, maybe Rosario Dawson's in the movie at some point, but like again, like she wasn't like she was all over the trailer.
I totally forgot. Like, part of me got so wrapped up because I do think that the construction of these girls in the first half is good enough that I truly did think this was the movie. And at some point, we were going to fold new girls in, like when we had to do some kind of a skate. But I thought these girls were going to continue on. Like we might lose one or two of them, like a slasher film. Well, and then when we reset, you're like, oh, my favorites are all gone. And now I've got to decide if I still like these new people. But by that point, we clearly know what Mike is up to and we don't like him at all. And we're not interested in seeing him kill the new ones.
Exactly. And that's what I like about it, too. Because I think, I mean, you know, at some point, like, okay, some of these girls are probably going to get killed, but they're carrying us to the end of the film.
Exactly.
And that's not what happens here. And so I think the fact that they all die is such a shock on a first watch because you're like, wait a minute. Well, unless you thought the movie was slow and you thought that actually was just the end of the movie. But I agree. I think the splitting of it into two halves, and again, like having all the girls die at the end of part one, and then we have the climax at the end of part two. But we're not killing these people throughout the film like a typical slasher film. But it's in the service of character development. Like, we just get to hang out with a bunch of slasher victims before they get slashed.
And think of the number of times that even like we covered a number of different types of movies, but often when we do cover particularly female heavy slasher films, like I'm thinking of Black Xmas, right?
Yep.
We have said, oh, I like these girls. I just wish we could have spent more time with them. And I think Death Proof is a really good example of, oh, these are girls we want to spend more time with, and we do get that before we kill them off.
So then I guess the question is, do you feel for them when they die? Because I do, but I feel like there's a certain segment of an audience, maybe a more misogynistic leading one, that find these women unlikable. And therefore, they don't feel things when they die. They're like, well, whatever, it's fine. I didn't like them anyway.
To those people, I would encourage you to reflect on what it is you don't like about them, because
I agree.
I find that these women are compelling. Like, I think that they're interesting. I'm intrigued by their sexual agency. I like their friendship, even when they're not always being nice to each other. Like, I like these women a lot.
And even the Jordan Ladd character, Shanna, like, she is the least developed out of all of these. But even Ladd, like, in her performance, just like injects just something in her. And I'm kind of like, oh yeah, like, I know that girl.
Yeah, the Shanna Banana line alone makes her memorable. Even though, you know, we could argue, okay, well, I don't really know a ton about her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got this lap dance sequence, and yes, obviously this is longer here. I do want to say, as much as I appreciate watching this in a fully formed number, I think the cut to the next section and the abruptness of it actually works better in Grindhouse than Death Proof.
Because the lap dance hasn't fully finished, but then we just cut to them in the parking lot outside. I actually think in the Grindhouse cut, I don't think we get any of this lap dance. Like, I think it cuts when they walk inside, and then we cut to the parking lot.
Yeah. So I think that is a funnier kind of cock tease joke, whereas this is like, oh, we just get to miss the quote unquote finale. Yeah. But I think comedically it works better in the theatrical cut, but this is actually more satisfying from a performance point of view.
I agree.
Okay, well, let's talk about Pam and the crash box. Ooh. So we go outside, and this is where we're really getting a sense of what the automobile is about. So he has made this vehicle death-proof so that you could crash it, into a wall and still survive. But then Pam is clearly put off by this because it doesn't look right. You know, there's no seatbelt. It's a glass cage inside this car, and then Mike just drops the facade as soon as we leave this parking lot, and he says, oh, it's a shame, like, you need to immediately be scared because you chose the wrong direction.
I love that moment. You know, which way are you going, left or right? Right. Oh, that's too bad. And then he goes on to this like little monologue about why that's a bad thing and why she should be scared now before he speeds off. I mean, again, I said it wasn't scary, but it is a very chilling moment from Kurt Russell, an actor who doesn't often play bad guys.
Yeah, no, and I think he's actually doing a fantastic job in this. He's pathetic in the back half when we need him to be, but he is properly scary here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, why is he doing it to this poor woman? I don't know.
Because he can. Honestly.
Because he can. Exactly.
So I'm going to bring Bruscuso back in. I think I mispronounced their name earlier, so apologies. But they say Tarantino can capture the unique anguish and fear that stems directly from the gender, as in women. And continues, Pam is psychologically tortured and brutally murdered at the hands of the stuntman shortly after they leave the bar together. What happens to her is a woman's typical nightmare, perfectly framed as such.
Oh, boy.
It's like, you accept this ride, and he was vouched for by Warren the bartender. So Pam ignored all of the all of the red flag warnings. Like, when you see that car, you think, okay, that is not right. But then this man says, oh, no, it's just a weird movie car, so just get in. And then he flips that switch, and all of a sudden, he's a killer.
Yep.
Also, it is wildly effective watching Rose McGowan just get tossed around in this. Like, the fact that she gets so bloody so quickly, and then he just dispatches her by slamming the brakes on, and she just kind of eats shit on the dashboard there. Like, it is startling how effective it is because we've had no violence up to this point.
And she, because, you know, my least favorite, she doesn't say, I don't want to die, but like, she is pleading with him to like let her out. And again, like the nonchalant way with which he just interrupts her and is like, well, actually, I'm just gonna kill you right now.
Yeah, to me, I'm thinking of movies like Women of the Hour, the Anna Kendrick film, and a couple of other ones where like they really have their finger on the pulse of what it's like to be a woman in a man's society, and how like you're either not believed, you're forced into sexist, uncomfortable positions with people who just want to fuck you and don't treat you like a person. Like you said, Pam pleads for her life here, but the moment that truly is horrifying to me, that I think will probably resonate with a lot of women's experiences, is when she says, I know it's a joke. I'm not going to tell anybody. I get it. I'm in on the joke. Like, she is saying exactly what she thinks she needs to say to get him to pull over. Like, whatever it takes just to get out of this car so I can survive.
But he's already been turning her words against her, too, because even before they got in the car, and she's like, oh, like, why'd you offer me a ride if you had this? And he goes, I didn't offer you a ride. You asked for one. I said yes. And it's like, so he's putting the blame on her for this now.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is the first time I watched this film, I thought, okay, so that's the murder. And now our girls are going to be trying to escape him for the rest of the film. And no trace.
We just go.
Yeah, he just kills these women. And I mean, as I said, I don't like seeing my girls get killed in the car, but the decision to cut back to the flashing of the headlights 4 separate times so we can get 4 different vignettes of violence, I just think it is so fucking good.
I agree. And the second you see Sidney Poitier's leg hanging out of that car,
God,
you know... So I agree. The way this is cut is so cool, and this is all practical. No CGI in here. And
oh wow,
this is Tarantino's quote. He goes, again, that's one of those things that I've done the last couple of times where I literally wrote shit and didn't have a clue how we were going to do it, but we figured it out. And he goes, at first I was like, well, I'm not really down with this CGI shit, but this could be of use. That could be okay, because you can't do this with real people, but...
Oh, you absolutely can, yeah.
I hate all that stuff, so we just tried to figure out how we could do it without using any CGI at all, and we did. We pulled off some really gnarly shit, and it was all on the day, in camera, and I... tell y'all right now, go look 2 years after this when the 4th Fast and the Furious movie, Fast and Furious, comes out. And it is wall-to-wall CGI car crashes. It is
so fucking fake.
Atrocious. And that Tarantino does these practical car things twice in this movie is miraculous.
And the difference is it's so obvious, right? You know...
Yes.
You feel this. It is visceral. I'm not going to lie. Watching Julia's leg shudder, like quiver as we see it sail through the air and then bounce off the paper. It is horrifying. It's gorgeous and gory, but all of this has an impact. I saw some people say this is kind of like Quentin Tarantino's Crash, because that's another reading of Stuntman Mike, is that he does
get off on it.
If he can't get off conventionally, he gets off on the car crashes. And
that's what Ranger Earl McGraw suggests too.
Yeah, exactly. But the car crashes themselves and the way that they're filmed, they have an impact to them. Like watching Arlene's face get taken off by this wheel in slow motion. You fucking feel it.
Honestly, I have trouble. It's such a cool effect because it looks great, but I have trouble watching that. So yeah, because
awful.
Because Jordan Ladd just flies up the windshield. Should we see her body bounce off the concrete? Lena Frank is we don't really see. She just kind of
she
she's
just
in the
gets
driver's
sprayed
seat.
with windshield.
Yeah, and then Jungle Julia loses her leg, and then but there's a change in the soundtrack whenever Arlene's face gets scraped off. It's like you can hear a woman scream, but it's not Arlene. Obviously, it's just it's part of the soundtrack, and I find it very upsettingly jarring. It's by design, it's meant to be upsetting, but it makes it hard for me to watch just because of this weird sound cue that plays when her face gets scraped off.
Yeah, there's an interesting moment too, because we then do get to see Stuntman Mike's car, fly up into the air. We're rolling. It's coming to a halt upside down. And there's, I think, a Willem scream.
Okay.
And it feels out of place, but there's a couple of interesting / questionable audio decisions in this sequence, but I don't think it detracts for me.
As meticulous as Tarantino is, I have to believe that everything is intentional, though. Every little choice that you're talking about, he's like, no, that has to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and folks, we haven't really referenced the fact that we're going to talk about Russ Meyer's Faster Pussycat Kill Kill when we get into the back half, because I think it's a bit more appropriate there. Mm-hmm. But as we mentioned, Tarantino is super movie literate. So if this is all references to other famous car crashes, real life or cinematic, I would not be surprised in the slightest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either.
Yeah. Okay. So we then get to see our friend Dr. Block Marley Shelton, who, I mean, it's not like she really gets much to do. She basically walks out of stuntman Mike's room into the hall, has a tense confrontation with her father, who is, of course, Texas Ranger Earl McGraw, who played by Michael Parks. And we do learn that she also has a brother, Ranger Edgar, who is played by James Parks. But apart from that, she basically just walks away. And of course, we know where her story will go because of Planet Terror.
But this is kind of the intermission for the movie here. This is also a little bit extended in the director's cut, but I think you could easily cut this, and it wouldn't make much of a difference. But I do kind of like Earl McGraw just being like, well, I know what happened, but I can't prove it. And I could try to prove it, but I could also use all that energy on a fool's errand to just go fishing or like whatever he wants to do. Go to go to the NASCAR circuit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like if you just watch Death Proof, this sequence would again stand out and you would say, these characters never come back. Like, what was the fucking point? It feels like it's all payoff for the Planet Terror bits. I don't mind it, if only because it is also giving us a bit of the film's thesis about the car as a weapon. Like, Ranger Earl McGraw does say he used a car, not a hatchet, but they're dead just the same. You're like, okay, that's definitely spelling it out for the people in the back.
Yeah, this is also just them, because Earl McGraw is a recurring character in Robert Rodriguez films. Like, he's in the opening scene of From Dusk Till Dawn. So I think this is just them going like, oh, we have to do Earl McGraw. But yes, I like your idea better.
We'll go with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so cut to a new title card: Lebanon, pause, Tennessee. So it is now 14 months later, and we're going to start the whole fucking thing all over again, Trace.
So as a viewer, though, are you like... Because I guess I can see it, especially after the intermission. You know, if it had picked up right here after the crash, maybe the momentum's still going. But you have had time to calm down before this, and now it's almost like we're just starting another movie. And again, if you're watching Grindhouse, the third movie in this triple feature.
Yeah, I remember feeling a little bit exhausted, but mostly just uncertain, because at least with Planet Terror, because it plays like a conventional film, there's the rising action that leads into the climax. And here it feels like we've already gotten that. And yeah, now I wonder, okay, so how will the movie restart? How will it build up a rising action and a tension and some energy even? And I was not as generous on a first watch. I feel much more comfortable now because, of course, I know where the film goes and I like these new girls just as much. But also, it's tough because I will confess, I love Arlene. Arlene is my favorite character in this movie. And I just had to watch her get her face, as you said so eloquently, scraped off by a fucking tire. And then I'm like, and the movie's still going. Okay, cool.
I'm glad to know that about you and Arlene. I wouldn't have pegged that for you, but yes. She's just the most interesting character, I think, too, just because she has a bit of a mystique about her.
Yeah, like she's sexy, but kind of effortless. And I like how pouty, but willing to go along with it. Like, I think I see a little bit of myself in Arlene, not the sexy parts, just the part where she's like, all right, we're here to have fun, so let's have some fucking fun. But also, I'm not putting up with your tomfoolery, Julia. Like, shut that shit down. I've hung out with a lot of Julias, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, I can tell.
Okay, so I'm going to bring in one final news source for a reference here. So I'm referencing Eric Kirsten's The Foxy, the Dead, and the Foxier, Revisiting Death Proof for Bright Lights Film Journal. I'm not going to lie, Kirsten really goes into it. Like, we're talking heavy film theory.
Okay.
To the point where at times I was just like, oh, this brings me back to some undergraduate film readings, which I didn't always care for. So part of me wanted them to get to the point a little bit faster, but I think that there is this really interesting line within the piece. So Kirsten says, the only way to escape the pain of our unfulfilled longing for these already gone women is to get in our death driver's seat and speed up faster than the film itself. So this is like a metatextual reading of what is happening, like with this hard sort of reset, and we have to start everything all new again. So they continue. So you got to speed up faster than the film itself, smashing the whole narrative to a dead, bloody halt. Of course, even that only lasts a short time as a remedy. Soon another set of girls, another movie begins. The Grindhouse lineup stretches endlessly on through countless murders and rolling of credits. So in some ways, it's like this idea that we're not really restarting the film, it's so much as this is Tarantino referencing the cyclical nature of film and how like we as an audience come and we watch people get murdered in these movies, and then there will just be fresh bodies and new movies to play endlessly. So that's part of the reason why the reset isn't so hard. It's like, well, yeah, we are just starting a new film, but we've been doing that forever.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, going back to what you said, the cyclical nature, that's also just the cyclical nature of slasher films and what Tarantino was talking about when he said, like, they're all the same. They're all the same.
Yeah, exactly. So in some ways, you know, this is Tarantino being a little subversive with the formula, because typically you wouldn't restart it and do it again. But this is the way that he likes to do things. And also it's a reference to the way that cinema operates in general, right? The lights dim, we start a new movie.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of the lights dimming, Trace, let's change the color palette of the film.
Yeah, we go black and white for a seemingly innocuous reason.
A little bit. If nothing else, I think the fact that it happens here is just cueing us. In case you missed the time jump, in case you missed the fact that we killed off all of our heroines, this is taking the film into a different space, changing it up.
Yes, and we are now also meeting the girls kind of piecemeal with this one, because we get Abernathy and Lee first before we ever meet Zoe or before we ever meet Zoe or Kim.
Yeah. So Kim is Tracy Toms. We have Lee, who is Mary Elizabeth Winstead in her cheerleader outfit. We will discover why later on. And they're talking about boys. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we realize that Abernathy, who is played by Nurse Rosario Dawson, is sleeping it off in the backseat. She's recovering from a night out on the town, so she's a little hungover.
And her feet are just exposed.
Yes. Yes, they are. And part of me thinks that, you know, once again, it's Tarantino jacking it to every actress's feet. But I think this is supposed to visually connect the Abernathy character to Julia. So we suddenly worry, okay, we've already seen appendages sticking out of cars and we know what can happen. So our new set of girls are already in danger, even though Mike isn't on the scene yet.
I think also, I don't know, do you think initially, these girls seem less capable, or maybe less, capable is not the right word, but they seem less...
It's interesting that you're struggling for the right words, because I've seen a lot of people say that the first group of women are a little bit flightier, more shallow, more traditionally sort of boy-obsessed girls, whereas this group, we were almost introduced to them through their jobs, right? Like we very quickly learn they're here, they're making a movie, they all have, sure, things or issues within the romantic love life, but it's like, I'm doing makeup, you're a stunt woman, you're an actress, and so on.
Well, so then it's maybe more so like, oh, these girls have maybe more characteristics that are viewed as traditionally masculine, like, I don't know, having a job. So maybe they are more capable of taking care of themselves.
I mean, I don't know that in 2007 having a job is a particularly masculine endeavor, but I would say the fact that 2 of the 4 are stunt drivers definitely codes them a little bit more masculine.
Yeah, that is true, I guess. But yeah, okay, continue.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, if for no other reason than folks may have realized. We've talked a lot about feminism this episode, but we haven't really talked about queerness. And I will confess, watching this expanded or extended director's cut version forced me to reconcile with the fact that none of the women are queer, whereas in the theatrical cut, I actually had assumed that Kim was queer.
So I actually always assume that because Tracy Toms just plays a lot of lesbians all the time.
And sadly, she is apparently not. It's all very depressing.
It's so fun. So I just Googled. I was like, is Tracy Toms a lesbian? Because I swear to God.
She plays it so often. And she's like, I would love to be, but I'm tragically not.
Yeah, she's... It's just wild. But yeah, and also, like, she is great in this movie.
Oh my God. Yeah. I love her always. But I think part of it is my gaydar goes off for homosocial gatherings, right? And this movie is so female centric. Like, we're really talking about two groups of 4 women, and they're, as much as they sometimes push each other's buttons or do mean things or say slightly shitty things to each other, you can definitely tell that there is an affection and a sisterhood. And I sometimes struggle not to cross that line and say, well, they must have romantic feelings for each other, right? Like, does Zoe ever mention a man? I don't know. She's curious about the other girls' love life, but does she want dick?
They are talking about dicks.
They're talking about a lot of dick.
Yeah, the Bechdel test is being failed on this side of the movie as well. Just a heads up.
Oh, yes.
But yeah.
Okay, so still in this black and white portion of the film, we do have Mike observing as Lee is singing within the car. Kim has gone into the convenience store to pick up supplies and so on, and Abernathy is still kind of asleep in the back seat, and this moment alone justifies the inclusion because I think it's so fucking creepy when he touches her feet without her consent.
His tongue is also hanging out of his mouth when he's doing it. So I thought he was going to lick it first. It is wild. But then he covers it up, not super smoothly, but enough that Abernathy buys it.
I don't think she does. I think she's willing to go along with it out of politeness, but she does immediately tell Lee, that guy creeps me out.
Yeah.
So I think she's actually on high alert. And when he turns back up in the black car, when we're out driving with Zoe on the hood, I think she immediately clocks it and says, oh, that's the same guy, because there was something weird in the parking lot. And then when I was putting on my boots, I saw him watching us across the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Italian Vogue, shall we? Oh my
God, we've had a whole plot about this thing.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting because let me just bring in Briscudo back again. So they say Abernathy and Lee are definitely supposed to be opposite of the stunties in Zoe and Kim. And they continue by saying that Abernathy and Lee are the more femme-presenting members of the group, but there are a ton of different ways you could show that without relying on the tired broad and sexist cliche of, oh, they're interested in fashion. So Briscuso doesn't read all of the feminism as passable in this film. Like, they're very much some of it is messy, some of it is good, but then moments like this it's just codifying, half of the members of this foursome are girly girls because they're interested in a $27 issue of Vogue.
Well, and that they also have the least amount of agency in this part of the film.
Agreed. Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, we do get this great moment for Rosario Dawson's Abernathy at the very end of the film. And I think it's meant to be a bit of a fuck yeah, good for her moment when she says, let's kill him. But apart from that, she's very much like the mom who wants to hang out with the cool girls, and she's relegated to the backseat of the car.
Yeah, I mean, and granted, like, she moved to the front seat during the big climactic car chase, but she's also not doing anything.
No. Yeah, because she doesn't have the skills, like the coded masculine skills that provide Zoe and Kim to do something more helpful because they are also stunt women.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so so we get this moment, these interactions where we are clocking that Stuntman Mike is being creepy, and then we go to the airport, and this is where we pick back up with the theatrical cut as we see Mike capturing the 3 girls now with Zoe Bell, and he's taking telephoto pictures of them.
Yeah, so this is when the Grindhouse cut of the film would start. So all that happened before was not in that cut.
Yeah. And again, I agree with you that I think you could probably lose it. The film mostly still makes sense, but we do lose a lot of anything interesting for especially Lee, but also a little bit of Abernathy.
Yeah, but I also think, because again, think about like the runtime real estate here. The car chase takes up the last 15 to 20 minutes of this movie, and this is the last 45 minutes of the movie. So essentially, half of this half of the film is a car chase, which means the character development for these girls is kind of also cut compared to the first half is cut in half. So we get to spend more time with those girls, the first group of girls, than we do the second group, just because more of the second half is the car chase.
Right.
So that's why I like having this this convenience store scene.
Right. Okay. So do you feel like you get to know the second group of girls as much as you do the first?
So you don't in terms of like their backstories, where do they come from, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like as people, like I know who these girls are. Sorry, I know who these women are.
I mean, the reason we've been using girls is because the movie credits them as girls.
Yes. I think even after the dinner scene they have, or maybe it's a lunch scene, I don't know, whenever they're eating around a table together, I think that is the diner. We're getting to know these people more here. And so I don't know, I think also just the choices they make in scenarios, you can tell a lot about Zoe and Kim just based on the debate they're having when they're arguing about whether or not they're going to play Ship's Master or not.
Yeah. At the risk of stepping in it and just like swallowing my whole foot, I think part of this works is because we have seen some of the dialogue exchanges, like a familiarity has emerged from the first group of girls because they were interested in sex and gossiping and just like having a good time with each other. And that is very much the same rapport that we're getting with the second group. So I feel like they just naturally have a lived in vibe to them because we spent a bunch of time with that first group. So even though they're not interchangeable, because obviously they're different actresses with different backstories and so on, it's almost like the goodwill and the investment from the first group carries into the second group. So we don't need quite as much.
Well, there's also not really a Julia type character in this group, which means there's not really a mean girl. And again, I wouldn't call Julia a mean girl per se.
I know what you mean.
She is abrasive. She's abrasive. And so I think that this is an easier group to latch onto because there's not an abrasive one in the bunch, whereas you do get that with Julia in the first group.
It is just so funny though, right? Because Arlene is our friend from out of town who's joining the other three for a kind of like fun night out. And then we've got Zoe, who is our international New Zealand friend who is flying into Tennessee to join us on this presumably like week-long or weekend party thing.
Yeah, so because they have the next 3 days off of filming. Like their schedules are free for the next 3 days.
Yeah, I just think it's funny how much overlap there is between the two friend groups and how much that helps to create a bond with the audience. So I think it's clever.
I fully agree.
Okay, yeah. So lots of talk in the car about, okay, what are we doing? This is where we learn all of their respective jobs, but also, stuff like Abernathy has been dating the director of the film who... Secretly, this is actually the same person that Julia was dating, by the way. Did you know that?
No, I did not get that. Oh, wait, so Chris Simonson?
Yes.
Oh my God, I have never put that together in the 17 years since this movie has come out.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? And so it almost layers some of what Nurse Rosario Dawson is saying because she's saying like, I'm not going to fuck this person. Whereas you very much get the impression that Julia has fucked.
Well, because we also get this conversation about how Kim has a habit of dating men who are already taken. And I love her excuse. I didn't steal anybody. They just jumped ship.
Also a foreshadowing reference of nautical elements.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's honestly pretty funny stuff, and I do like how candid they are and how do I wish that they were a little bit more supportive when Abernathy says, well, this guy was a shithead and he treated me badly, like he got me a gift for my birthday, knew it was my birthday, and then slept with somebody else. And they're all like, well, you weren't fucking him, so what did you expect? I'm like, girls, come on.
I'm going to tell you right now, again, this is where, again, we as two men can have this debate as a bunch of women listen to us, but like,
sure,
I have fully met women that talk to each other like that. Like,
when
I worked in restaurants, like, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like you can say no to shitty men without feeling like you have to cave. Because so much of this movie is, there's an element of politeness, which we talked about with the Pan character, but also this idea, like a transactional sex for companionship vibe that the whole film has, where you like, if you want men to do something, or if men are ever even nice to you, it's probably because they want to fuck you or fuck you over, or in Mike's case, they want to kill you with their car. So again, like, to me, that is a pretty feminist message.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a survey of our current landscape.
It's a feminist concept.
There we go. Okay. Well, let's talk briefly about the diner sequence, because this is where we get some more stuff about who the girls are. And I do like the way that Tarantino shoots this. So it's mostly a long take. We've got a bit of a roaming camera that's on a 360-degree spin. And the girls are talking about Zoe's cat-like talent, so she can fall into a ditch and pop back out and be completely fine.
Little further.
We also learn that Kim packs a gun, even though, you know, she could have a knife or pepper spray, but the gun will get the job done. So these are both check-off items.
Mm-hmm. A bitch need a gun.
Truly, yes. And then we, of course, laid the groundwork for driving the Vanishing Point Challenger. This is one of the things that Zoe really wants to do, because there is a local person who is selling the car. So she can just get behind the driver's wheel. Then we can do, what is it? Scouts? No.
Ship's mast.
Then we can do ship's mast. Yeah. Okay, so we do a little bit more talking at the dinner, but then we move over and introduce ourselves to Country Bumpkin Jasper, who is played by Jonathan Lowrain.
And he's an Adam Sandler holdover. Like, he's in all of Adam Sandler films, but he's also in he's in Kill Bill as one of the truckers.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, this feels very rural horror vibes. Like, we're definitely presenting him as a threat to Lee in all of these interactions. Well, mostly because we present Lee as collateral in exchange for being able to drive the car. And again, we're shooting, like, we got the girl crotch scene when Arlene is introduced, when she has to run in and go pee. And this one is like, we leave Lee in this dangerous spot where she gulps quite literally out loud as we just have his crotch framed at her level as the other girls leave her behind.
Here's the thing. I found this funny in 2007. I still find it funny today because, again, that gulp really does a lot.
It's a comedy beat, but it's a very scary, gross situation.
So, okay. I found a quote from Mary Elizabeth Winstead in a Collider interview from 2021.
Okay.
Someone asked her about this. I don't think it's a very satisfying answer, but here you go. That's one of those things in retrospect that you kind of go, I remember feeling it was weird at the time, but it was also sort of like, I don't know. And maybe looking back at it, it's like, yeah, that was pretty messed up of your friends to leave you with some random creepy dude. That's not okay. So I certainly don't think they're good friends anymore to her. But I'm also not sure that they are her friends really at all. I think maybe she thought they were her friends, but she was really more like the butt of the joke, because we do get that moment two moments in the diner where she is kind of the butt of the, or they make fun of her naivete for lack of a better phrase. But yeah. So I again, like, I don't know a lot of women now who would do this, but I also bear in mind they think they're leaving her there for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying.
I think that this is the sort of most confronting moment for, any kind of feminist messaging, or if we want to talk about female friendships and how you really should not fucking do this kind of shit. Whether we want to make excuses for it, like it's 2007, if we want to say, oh, well, this is Quentin Tarantino writing this for female characters. Yeah, we can have all of those debates. I think, this definitely does illuminate that Lee is not as integral a member of the group, and maybe even of the film, and maybe that's why we don't come back for her at the end, because at the end of the day, she wasn't that important.
Yeah.
It's rough. It's not as you said, it's not really a satisfying answer.
Yeah, it does suck, because we like Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and I would like I would have liked to see her in the car crash scene, in the car chase scene, but then I'm also maybe, because again, like, Tarantino wrote the script, so I wonder if it's kind of like a thing where it's like he's thinking logistically, like, well, it's hard enough having like 3 girls in this car for this scene, like, also if we had Lee in the car, she would be in the back seat, so I have to think about filming in the back seat too, on top of all this other shit.
Well, and if you don't have something for the character to do,
And like, unless you have to kill her, but then at that point, I feel like, again, like killing any of these girls would kind of, if there is a message behind the film, it
defeats the point of the back half.
But still, this conversation Abernathy has, like, when he asks if Kim is the colored girl as he's speaking to Rosario Dawson.
Just such a weird moment. Like, and that really tells us a lot about this non-character, right? But also as a film audience, no.
I reply, yes, Kim would be the girl of color.
I mean, you mentioned earlier that Rosario Dawson really gets to shine in these moments. And I think when she's clapping back at Zoe and Kim and saying, don't relegate me to just being the mom. I want to hang out with the cool girls and that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think any of these girls are as fleshed out as the first group, but because of the actresses and the way that they bite into some of this dialogue, it just instantly endears me to them.
I think the performances are doing more of the legwork in the back half than the script is, whereas in the it's kind of an even split in that first half, where the performances are complementing the screenplay, which is doing a good job. But yes, but I will say though, Tracy Toms gets her moment to shine here, and her tiff with Zoe, where she's like, "I'm not gonna fucking do ship smash." This is where she's really like, it almost felt like Stephen Sondheim, those rapid singing lyrics, but it's just like Tarantino's rapid fire or Gilmore Girls dialogue, where she's just going boom, 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 boom.
It's a lot of rat-a-tat-tat, and she definitely has the kind of wit and the tongue to handle Tarantino's dialogue. None of this seems to faze her. She's a total natural at handling all of this dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, just her cadence during some things, it's just she's a badass, man. I love this character.
Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about Ship's Mass? So,
because we don't know what it is.
Yeah, so I mean, this is another great narrative device, right? Make the audience wonder, what the fuck are we doing right now? Like, why do we need to debate about putting on gloves, putting on the leather jacket? Why do we need multiple belts? Oh, Jesus God, she's getting out on that car roof and then onto the hood.
Yep. So basically, Ship's Mass is someone drives 80 miles an hour while you're sitting on the hood of the car, supported only by belts that are tied to the doors that you are holding onto. They are tied around your wrist. You are holding onto them.
It's such a strong no. And the fact that, we do this because we have Zoe Bell, who is arguably one of the best professional stunt women working, but the audience was freaking out in the theater when I saw this in 2007. Like, if you thought, okay, well, the second half of the movie is a little bit slow, it's a little bit quiet. Not in these parts, motherfuckers.
I get it, like, where I'm like, okay, the last 15 minutes of this movie is a fucking, like, one of the best car chases I have ever seen in my entire life put on film. And
it's adrenaline injection.
But then it becomes a question of, if you were bored by a lot of the talky stuff, is this enough? Is this enough of a climax of a payoff for all the dialogue beforehand? And as someone who is not bored by any of the dialogue, I say yes, but I don't know.
I do think for some people it probably comes a little too late, or they would have appreciated if it had been, okay, stretch out that first half, don't introduce the second group of girls. Again, I think that would maybe be missing part of the point, but
also we're like downplaying the importance of having Zoe Bell be a character, not even playing herself, but just being able to act as the lead in this movie, because without an actual stunt woman on the front of that car, Tarantino wouldn't have been able to film it the way he does, because you'd have to constantly hide the face of the stunt woman on the front of the car.
Yeah, and there is no hiding Zoe Bell. Like, it is so obviously her. We are zooming right up to her fucking face a bunch of different times. Like, we're watching her do all of this, and I am white knuckling the seat. Like, I'm thinking about it right now, Trace, and my palms are sweating.
I have seen this, much like Planet Terror and Grindhouse. I have seen all of these many, many, many times, because I showed them to so many people in high school and college, and this scene still gets my pulse racing.
Yeah, it's really, really fucking good. And, the stunt alone would be great. And then we see Mike come in because he has been watching them over on the Vista. He realizes this is a great opportunity. Once again, we're chuckling because, a good time is about to be had. I'm about to get my rocks off. So he goes after them and we start rear-ending them. And I love the fact that Zoe loses one belt, and then she loses both belts.
Oh, she's
because you think, okay, well, she's just going to be swinging back and forth for a little while or something. No, she has to hang on to the part of the hood that connects to the windshield, and then the part where she goes head first, and she's hanging on to the grill at the I lose my mind. Trace.
I mean, because I thought about while I was watching this, I was like, how is Joe gonna beat by beat plot this? Because there is dialogue for the rest of the movie, but it's a lot of screaming. But it's okay, we're gonna try it. I will say though, there is one really good moment from Dawson right before Mike starts attacking them. Basically, when they start playing Ship's Mass, we have this kind of like close up, like slow zoom in to Dawson's face in the back in the passenger seat as she's looking at Zoe on the hood, like she's like scared.
She gets into it, right?
But yeah, then you see it more from like scare and worry to admiration.
This is amazing. And I love this.
It's a wordless moment, but you can see it on Dawson's face.
I literally made note of that because I do think it's such a huge character beat for her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so good. But anyway, so yes, Mike is going to town on them.
Yeah. And I think it's important. The film is still trying to put us into his point of view. Like, we are actually getting point of view shots from either him or you could argue the car's perspective. Like, there are points where we actually see the camera positioned right behind the hood ornament. And it's an interesting point of view effort because I don't align myself with Mike anymore because I've already seen what he did to the first group of girls. I don't want that to happen to this new group of girls. The risk factor seems higher because it's actually a sustained chase. Like, the girls, to a certain extent, can actually protect themselves, whereas the first group of girls, they had no ability to get away from it.
Right. Because it was a surprise kill for them, but this one, he's like chasing them. So which again, I feel like you're watching this and you're like, okay, this is going to be the rest of the movie. Hopefully they'll cause him to crash and he'll die, or we'll just get a repeat and they'll all die. We'll see what happens.
It seems like there's only two outcomes, and we do manage to find a bit of a covert third that works well. But yeah, I mean, so we're getting a bunch of stuff where he is sideswiping them. There is that one moment where he realizes he thinks he's going to be able to get Zoe Bell because now she's just hanging onto the hood. And he says, "Get ready to fly, bitch." You're just like,
because you don't get a lot of that from him in the first half of the movie. This is where you're like, oh, he's a special kind of asshole.
Yeah, special kind of misogynist too, right? Like, the glee factor that he takes in knowing, okay, well, I'm not just going to ram them head on. And partially, I think it's because this is 14 months later and he got fucked up by that first one, so he can't do it the same way.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, wait, so he do this like once a year where like he kills a group of girls, recovers for a year, then kills another group, recovers for a year. Just get the car redone every time. Like, is it a new car?
Well, if you think about it, that's the slasher formula, right? I do it once a year and I come back on the anniversary, the holiday, whatever. So
you know what? Sense. So we're basically getting Death Proof and Death Proof 2 in one package.
Exactly that. Yeah. All right, Trace. So let's talk about when the tables get turned, shall
Joe,
we?
I mean, I can't. This is, again, it's one of those movies that, because I've shown it to so many people, I do like watching people watch this movie, specifically when we get this turn, because I don't think I ever even predicted on a first watch that this is where we were going to go, but Tracy Toms is, oh, hell no, let's kill his ass.
Well, and this is after, so he ends up peeling out into the ditch, and then he gets out and he's laughing like, hey, we all just had a great fucking practical joke, good time kind of deal. And she just shoots him in the arm.
Okay. And then he freaks out and he drives away. And then this is when they have their like little debate, you know, and they're like, oh, do you want to go get him? Like, yeah. Oh, also Zoe Bell's, I'm okay. As she like hops up out of the grass.
So fucking good. And of course, Abernathy goes, of course she is. Of course she is.
Of course she's fine. Fucking Zoe the cat. Okay. But okay. So they're going to go after him. And we're like, cool, that's great. Now we're getting the revenge portion of this movie.
Yeah.
The comedy. Once we catch back up with Mike and he is in his car crying like a baby.
Yeah. because he has been shot. He doesn't usually get hurt unless it's a kind of self-inflicted vehicular injury kind of deal. No, he has driven down this side road and parked the car. He can barely reach the bottle of booze in the glove compartment because he's bleeding and it hurts and he's crying. And then he has to, gear himself up to pour a little bit of booze onto the wound. And Kurt Russell is so fucking good in these moments.
My subtitles had hysterical sobbing, but to me, the piece de resistance of this entire sequence is him just going, "Oh, why? Why?"
Yeah. It is so melodramatic and overwrought. I also do want to highlight, because we've not really talked about much of the Grindhouse, because at this point there basically isn't any, right?
Yeah.
We don't have any kind of scratches on the film. We don't have any more of the time jumps or anything. But I do want to say the Grindhouse exploitation 70s-ness I really saw in the blood, because the blood is that 70s red where it looks like fucking paint when we see it splashed across the windshield.
Yeah, and because there's still a filter over it. Maybe it's not a filter, maybe it's just the actual way he filmed it, but it doesn't look like a film from 2007. So we're getting minimal distress on this, especially when compared to Rodriguez's Planet Terror, but there's still a 70s aesthetic to this.
Yes, I would agree, but I would also argue that when you look back in hindsight on the two quote-unquote parts of Death Proof, it does feel like the Jungle Julia Arlene section feels like it could have taken place in the 70s more easily.
I agree, but that's also because, in this climactic car chase, Mike does drive through a movie theater sign that's advertising Wolf Creek and Scary Movie 4.
Yes. Yes. Choices were made.
Oh, why? Why?
Oh no.
I every time I have watched this with someone, it's just that moment of him, because I think it takes you a second to realize, he's not even hurt. That bullet grazed him.
Yeah, he's a big fucking man, baby. And that just makes it all the more, I'm going to use the word satisfying about 50 times in the next 10 minutes. But when they just plow into the back of him and he goes straight into the I drive steering column, is that the thing? Yeah,
sure, whatever.
Basically, they just crash into the back of this car and he eats shit. And it's so good because, Tarantino also knows how to shoot this again so that we are hitting the visceral impact of it. And we don't even waste a beat. Zoe Bell has grabbed a pipe from a ditch and she has been riding the car like it's a
a jousting
What is she
tournament.
doing?
She's jousting.
Yes, literally that. And she just runs up, beats the ever-loving shit out of him. I will say, technical complaint, we get to see Mike's face a lot after this as he's driving.
It's not beat up.
And he's not beat up at all. And she fully hits him in the face a bunch of times with this pipe. And it's a bit annoying.
Because the camera's placed inside the car, on the opposite side of Kurt Russell. And so she just keeps bashing him. I understand and I hear your complaint totally, but goddamn, just her just beating the shit out of him, stabbing him with this pipe.
Yeah. So he manages to get away. So he has driven away, and this is when the girls give chase, and they're whooping. And again, it's the same kind of sound that we got when the girls were whooping for Jungle Julia's billboards in the first half of the film.
God, look at you putting this shit together. I'm like, cars drive fast, girls good.
Girls good, fast cars, action, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to bring Brisculo back in. I think I've said the name different every fucking time. Loving it. I'm having a great time over here. So they say it's quite literally an attempt to silence her. So we've that's what he's doing. He's driving around trying to silence women. So literally killing them, proving his sense of dominance over someone who has clearly got a command of themselves. But this final chase sequence and what they do to him, it ends up highlighting that the women who are going to do Mike in are quite literally his equals. So other stunt people are his equals, and that's why they are able to best him.
Okay.
So we've got Kim ramming this death-proof car from behind, and we've got a bunch of anal sex overtures. So, she's relishing tapping that ass one more time.
You don't like it up the ass, do you, motherfucker? You redneck lunatic bastard.
It is funny to call him a redneck lunatic bastard.
I mean, they are in Tennessee.
Yeah. So we eventually end up driving out into the freeway. So all of this has been back roads. It's, it feels like the damage would be low. It's really between them and him. But then we get out onto the highway, and all of a sudden there's all these other cars in the mix. And it's kind of fun to watch Tarantino change the way he shoots this, because all of a sudden we're taking out other cars. It's a different kind of action sequence as a result. And I'm going to bring Quinn back in one last final time. So they say, as soon as Zoe and her gearheads begin to use their sexuality as a weapon, so they literally ram their vehicle up his ass, this is when the stuntman takes flight. So the patrilineal order of the muscle car disintegrates, and the girls reduce the stuntman to a bloody pulp with their bare hands. I do like the moment where they end up pulling up beside him and he tries to apologize to them.
I was just playing around. And then they mock him. Oh, he was just playing.
Yeah, so we do this kind of tete-a-tete back and forth, and he eventually manages to sideswipe them so that they go off into a road, and he thinks that he has lost them. And I love the framing of this because we're still following alongside him, but the framing is such that we can actually see their car on the ridge on the road above him.
Yeah.
It's just really great. So we start to chant, "We don't want a dead end. Not a dead end. No dead end." And Mike begins to laugh because he thinks that he has won. And this is when they T-boned the back of the car.
Yeah, they sideswipe the corner, and and again, this was all done in a take. Like, they flip this motherfucking car. And Tarantino's request was like, hey, we want to flip the car, but I want him to stay on the road. Like, he can't go, he can't fly off. So they had to,
right.
I'm just like, oh my God, this is why they use CGI.
Yeah, because it'd be so much easier to control the conditions. And but as a result, this looks so much better. Watching this car wreck is really, really great. It's really, really satisfying.
Absolutely.
And then we get more whining and bitching from Mike. Oh, I think my arm is broken.
Okay, because here's the thing. He is literally barely done saying that line before Zoe Bell has grabbed his arm and dragged him. I think she even says, "Is it?" And she drags his arm out.
Yeah. And then we just form a circle around him so that the three of them can take turns punching him. It's not quite slow-mo, but we get to always see them punch him, and then we freeze frame on occasion as well.
It is so cathartic. It is so, This is one of the most satisfying endings for a villain I've ever seen in my life.
It's funny, though, too, because I remember this playing out quite a bit longer. Like, the scene where they're punching him, it does feel like we're taking our time because they're punching him so long and he's still managing to stay upright and everything. But I remember this going on for ages, and it's not as long as you might think. We do this, he falls to the ground, and then they just jump in jubilation, and we get the freeze frame with the end. I thought we killed him. And then we come back so that Nurse Rosario Dawson as Abernathy can just lift her leg in
it's a heel drop? Kick? Yeah. She just buries the heel of her boot into Kurt Russell's face.
Yeah. And we've been getting some great sound effects as they've been punching him. It's very over the top. But yeah, we just get this great satisfying splat sound right into credits.
Oh, also Queer Connection, though, because the song that plays over this, once we get to the end and we go back, it's April March's cover of it's Chick Habit, which is a cover of a French song. But this is the main theme or played over the credits of But I'm a Cheerleader.
Oh, nice. Okay. Cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this, I'll give the final word to Briscuso. I think I got it right that time. But they say the main thing Tarantino gets right here, and that he gets right in other films like the Kill Bill series, is that female revenge couldn't be more deserved.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also a female revenge film that's not a rape revenge film.
Yeah, unless you want to read vehicular rape, right? Because if you read sexual aggression into Stuntman Mike's actions, then it is, but it's not in that offensive way that we see so often in male-directed rape revenge films.
Right. It's a thematic rape, not an literal rape.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is Death Proof, everyone. Joe, final thoughts.
This is just a really fun time. I mean, I can definitely understand if people think that it's too slow, it's too talky. If you don't connect to the women, obviously you're going to have a big problem for this film, because that is what probably 90% of it is, with two really great car crashes or car chases, bookending it.
One car crash, one car chase.
There we go. Thank you so much. Ultimately, I think that this is a really enjoyable movie. I had a great time revisiting it. Love all of these women. I think Kurt Russell is having a ton of fun with this. Very interested to hear from listeners if they do feel like this has a feminist message or if it is executing it well. To me, that was the kind of conversation piece I was having with the film as I was watching it. But just on a straightforward, turn your brain off, enjoy Tarantino's dialogue when he's not saying the N-word, and then shiny, visceral car crashes. Yeah, really good time.
Yeah, no, I love this movie. And again, I still cannot pick a preference between this and Planet Terror, because also they're just two... Well, they're two very different viewing experiences. So while they were paired together as a double feature, like, I would watch Planet Terror if I was feeling one way, and I would watch Death Proof if I was feeling another way. And I certainly do not think this is Quentin Tarantino's worst film. And again, I don't think Quentin Tarantino has a bad film, but if I was going to pick, I would pick Reservoir Dogs.
Hot take. Okay.
I know. I think I like it. It's very clearly a first film.
Okay. Whereas for me, it would be The Hateful Eight.
I need to rewatch Hateful Eight. I remember liking it, but I also don't remember a ton from it, you know?
Yeah, it's got some great beats. I love a lot of the performers, and I just think that we take an interesting idea and we don't do enough with it.
Yeah. Peak Tarantino for me is Kill Bill and Inglourious Bastards. I do love Pulp Fiction. I don't revisit Pulp Fiction very often.
Right. Okay.
But anyway, Death Proof is perfect. I love it so much. Maybe not perfect, but it's really, really, really good. I love this movie so much. I don't watch it often, but I think it's just because I just watched it so much when I was younger. So I just don't think to pull it back on. But now that I have both this Blu-ray and the Planet Terror Blu-ray and the Grindhouse Blu-ray, maybe I'll be checking them out more often.
You're such a connoisseur. Look at you.
All right, everyone. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, some quick housekeeping. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. If you want to chat with other listeners, join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
It's a new year, shouldn't you? Shouldn't you?
You should. It is. If you didn't do it for the holidays, which you should have, but if you didn't, do it for the new year. Make it your New Year's resolution. Leave us a 5-star review. And of course, if you want more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you'll get 357 hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on Bloody Axe Wound, Season 1 of The Creep Tapes, Squid Game Seasons 1 and 2, ooh, a lot of TV, Lee Winnell's Wolfman, and a brand new audio commentary on the sci-fi schlock Supernova for its 25th anniversary. So January horror has often been described as bad, yes, but we're going to give you a January horror commentary.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because obviously a lot of films from the year 2000 are turning 25 this year, and it's a reminder there was some real trash that came out that year, but I think we're going to make it enjoyable trash.
I'm really excited. I saw this movie in theaters with my dad because it was PG-13 when it came out, but now it's rated R, which I'm just like, what happened there? So,
right.
Anyway, but Joe, what are we covering next week?
Okay, so in aligning the Patreon with the main feed, because we do have this bright and shiny new Wolfman film coming out, we're going to go and check out a Universal Monster version. So we're going to flash back to 1941 and talk about The Wolfman.
Yeah, we are. Good movie. But I think I've only seen it a couple times, so this will be a relatively fresh watch.
Okay, and I have never seen it.
Ooh, wait, have you seen Joe Johnston's 2010 one?
Is that the one with Benicio?
Yes.
I have seen it, but honestly, I had to pause because I couldn't even remember if I had. That's how forgettable it is.
Yeah, it's pretty forgettable. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as everyone says it is, but we're not talking about that next week. We're talking about the original.
Yes.
But I'm excited you'll get to watch this for the first time, Joe. It's a classic.
I know. I truly have not seen a lot of the Universal classics. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited that we get to keep covering them.
But until then, everyone, we can cross out Death Proof and finally the all of Grindhouse.
Indeed. Cross out horror queers.